Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 331. We're talking Rotworld. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim. There's a couple of aliens that want to take you up into their spaceship because they want to talk to you about becoming a superhero. So says the sensei of the whatnot, Segulin, and the Duke of You-Know.
How's it going, eh?
On this episode...
You know what? I think I'd do it. I think I'd accept that.
Would you really?
If I got the superpowers, I'd be okay with it. If they just took me up there, ripped my insides out, threw me back together, and threw me on the ground, I'd have an issue.
Wouldn't that be funny? I got taken to an alien spaceship thinking I was going to become a superhero, and all I got was this T-shirt. and a scar. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Sponsoring us this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, this is one of my favorite times of the month when we see the deals that DCB Service is going to be offering. For me, it's always great that, all of my monthly books have an amazing discount to them. But I also find out what bundles they're going to be doing, because a lot of times they'll take a comic line and bundle 5 or 6 issues together and give you a deal on that to try out some of those new issues. They'll also give you a deal on trade paperbacks and hardcovers and absolute editions, where they extend their discount even further than usual. Remember, DCBService.com is a Comixology digital partner. What that means is anytime you do your digital purchases from DCBService.com, 5% of that purchase builds up a credit that you could be using towards their website. So if you do a lot of digital purchasing, it doesn't cost you anything more to go to their website and do the shopping from there, but it does give you credit towards future purchases of any of the paper products that you want to grab. So please consider doing that over at DCBService.com. They support us, so please consider supporting them. We have links right on RagingBullets.com, so please make sure to click on them and go over to their websites. Over at InStockTrades.com, we're talking about the Rot. In particular, this episode, we're focusing on Swamp Thing and Animal Man. There is an amazing collection at InStockTrades.com of Swamp Thing material from the past. Some great classic material from Alan Moore that's available, including trade paperbacks and hardcovers. For example, Swamp Thing, Volume 1, The Saga of the Swamp trade paperback. Collect Saga of the Swamp Thing issues 21 to 27. This book is $19.95 regularly. It's available for 45% off, only $10.97. They also have this series available in hardcover, Saga of the Swamp Thing Book 2 hardcover, for example. $24.99 regularly, 45% off, only $13.74. So whether you want the hardcover versions, whether you want softcover versions, InStockTrades.com is the place to go. They also have, going back to the classic Len Wein, Bernie Wrightson versions, they have The Secret of the Swamp Thing trade paperback, $9.99 regularly, 45% off, only $5.49. So if you're trying to dabble in Swamp Thing on a budget, there's a lot of different options there. Remember, orders of $50 or more give you free shipping, especially with holiday seasons coming up. This is a great month if you're trying to buy gifts for friends. To bundle up, buy a lot of those things together, get the free shipping, save yourself even more money. The cool part is with the money you save, a lot of times you can grab a trade or two for yourself as well, which is a really cool way to do that. Grab a couple things for yourself, grab some things for some friends. You're saving money. You're getting them cool gifts that they're going to enjoy. And, we're all on a budget this time of year. I love shopping that way because I think it's good for me, it's good for my friends. We're all happy and having a great time during the holiday season. This weather starts to get cold, and it's a great time to be doing a little bit more comic reading than we normally do. So please consider InStockTrades.com your collected edition source. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on the show. So, if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Rip, 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 rip. I'm Anton Arcane, joining Jim to talk comics.
Through the magic alchemy of nature's most awesome sources of energy, Ray Palmer, atomic physicist, becomes the atom.
Jim, I want to really quick shout out John M. Wilson's podcast, The New 52 Adventures of Superman. It's new52superman.libsyn.com, and I'll have that in the show notes. He's doing coverage of the Hell on Earth storyline coming soon, so he wanted to shout that out. But the reason why I'm shouting him out, I thought this was really cool. John, I guess I naturally assumed that everybody who was in the Facebook group for Raging Bullets was people who were listeners previously. John never listened to the show, and he's been participating in our Facebook group for a while. And I think that's really kind of cool. I actually kind of like that the Facebook group has grown beyond and kind of become its own little entity that people kind of feel comfortable coming in and talking about comics and geek culture and stuff like that, whether they're listeners of the show or not. I actually find that interesting. So John sent me this really nice message saying that, hey, I actually listened to an episode finally, and he said some very nice, kind words about it. And I wanted to make sure to personally shout out his podcast because I think that's really cool, and I'm going to be actually checking out his coverage of Hell on Earth. So it's neat how the Facebook group has led to kind of a different culture, a different community that has grown beyond the show in its own way. So I just think that's kind of neat, and I wanted to shout out John's podcast because I thought it was cool.
Groovy.
Jim, I want to kick off talking about Swamp Thing #0. And we're going to talk casually about all this because there's really, with Swamp Thing, we've got a lot of content to talk about. We're going to be talking about 0, issue 13, issue 14, and, of course, the annual, and how all of this leads into this whole Rotworld storyline. I'm a big fan of how these 0 issues have been working with Rotworld in the sense that they're giving us a background origin of the characters, but they're doing it in such a way that they're showing a history to Rotworld, which I've really become a big fan of. I like that we've talked about this with the 0 issues previously, that they're all being handled slightly differently in a way that kind of fits the books that they're representing and storylines that they're representing, and this was certainly no exception. So I also like that it's setting the stage for this sense of these avatars of the green and the red and the rot, and how they've had, like, I don't want to say a tentative peace, but kind of a tentative balance between all of them. But the rot now is trying to disrupt that balance, something that it's done throughout its history, but it's usually led to the creation of a new avatar, not the intended destruction completely of the avatar. Anton Arcane is doing just that. He's going through in history, he's trying to destroy the avatar that's presently in place, but then also the one that would become the successor, and really trying to stamp out any possible opposition to his plans. So then this is what's leading to the concept of Rotworld. If we can get them out of the way, now I can fully take control. I love this concept and how it's working out. This storyline, I'm amazed at. I find this as gripping as the stuff that's going on in the Bat books and the Green Lantern books right now. This is a story arc and a storyline where these books are connecting in a way that I'm really finding pleasing. I love that the Swamp Thing story, it is taking a look at a certain element of Rotworld. It's completely contained, yet it intersects with what's going on over in Animal Man, what's going on in Frankenstein. I'm guessing these books eventually are going to kind of come together and all have a meeting point, but the way that it's being presented for me is this is the way I prefer crossovers to be done. Give me the option to read my book that I'm enjoying, read the creative team that I'm enjoying in their book. They're a part of this larger overarching story, but we're seeing something complete in that book. I liked reading multiple issues of Swamp Thing in a row, then jumping over to Animal Man and reading this story from Animal Man's perspective. That's my preference in how we do these crossovers, and I think that's working really well, and it's something they're doing in their other books, so I'm glad they carried it over here.
Oh, yeah, big time. This is one of the things I enjoy about recording is right before I record, I always do another massive reading. I do a sit down and I'll, like this time I read 0, 13, Annual 14. All boom, 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 right one after another. And you really get a cool idea of the overarching story. And then jump from that to Animal Man to Frankenstein. You're really seeing the big picture. And that was something that I really, just overall enjoyed of this. And it's funny, before we were recording, we were kind of slightly just talking about which of these story arcs we're kind of enjoying more. And it's a tough pick for me because each of the different aspects of the Rotworld have something really neat involved with it. You know, you got your Animal Man where you I'm seeing more of the family side of it. You got Swamp Thing where to me he just seems like just this really, you know, he's a badass, and I'm really digging that about him. I'm digging seeing the Swamp Thing throw down. You had that really cool scene where he's like super tall, where he's crushing, you know, the rotted Teen Titans. You've got a couple other stuff where he's doing some seeing the super freaky, you know, just that Swamp Thing, just how much energy, how much power he has. I was just like, wow, that is a really cool concept, and just, you know, it's something I never thought of because I've never really read Swamp Thing. I never really knew what Swamp Thing was about. So the New 52 is my exposure to the character and what he's able to do and what he's capable of doing. And so Rotworld, he's really getting to flex his muscle and really showing what he can do. And I'm looking forward to what's going to happen in the world after everything's fixed, because I'm assuming everything's going to get fixed.
One would hope. Otherwise, this is going to be the DCU. One of the things that I'm really liking about this, first of all, I agree with you that I love that Swamp Thing went all Treebeard from Lord of the Rings. That was really cool how he did that. But one of the things that I'm really liking about the New 52, and you're touching on this, is we've lost some books along the way that have been like Swamp Thing and Animal Man, and Frankenstein, I think, is coming to an end, if I remember correctly. But I love that these books are here. Like Swamp Thing and Animal Man, I know are going to definitely be continuing on. And I think Frankenstein is going to be joining Justice League Dark, or he's going to be joining a team, I think. So that character is going to be continuing on. I really love that we're getting introduced to characters that before I'm with you, I either read very casually. I read a trade here or thereof, or I read them in crossovers. I read them in miniseries. I didn't read them in lengthy runs in their own books. I'm getting to know these characters and these concepts and why they're cool. I know they make some changes and tweaks to them to modernize and make them today. It also makes it fresh and new for people that were longtime readers of those characters, so they're getting something new as well, versus rehashing what was done before. And so you see, my thing, one of the things I like about the New 52, and I'm finding why I'm not having an issue when they're revamping characters, is that I don't feel like now when they've rebooted that they're trying to retell the same stories that creators in the past may have told better. Do you know what I mean? Like, let's not do Killing Joke again and do like a watered down version of Killing Joke. Let's tell new stories with these characters, like Death of the Family. What's so cool about that? It's a new Joker story. This is Scott Snyder's Killing Joke, and what I mean is he's telling his own stamp on the Joker story. With Rotworld, we're getting a stamp on Swamp Thing, a stamp on Animal Man, a stamp on Frankenstein, and what the interconnectivity, and in its own way, Justice League Dark, because we're seeing characters like John Constantine being brought in to this story arc. Well, the entire DC universe, but John Constantine still seems to be one of us.
And Orchid as well.
Yes.
Orchid's around, so...
And I like that. It's this greater sense of the world being affected by the implications of what is going on right now. I'm really drawn to this because these are characters that I was not reading. I was an Animal Man fan in miniseries that had been done, around the Crisis storylines that were being done in the DC universe prior to this, and I got into the character big time. And I felt like this new series, with its relaunching and refreshing of the character, has captured everything that I liked about the character before. I'm a fan of this stuff because I'm a Batman junkie. I love reading all of the Batman books, but when I'm reading an Animal Man, when I'm reading a Swamp Thing, when I'm reading Frankenstein, this is completely different than that. And in order to get me interested in following these books, you've got to do that. Gail Simone made an interesting post on her Facebook page this week talking about how much she loves comics, but that one of the things that almost like, and I'm believe me, I'm paraphrasing and putting my own little spin on it, but this is the basic routine behind it. It kind of breaks her heart when a title that she's really digging hasn't captured a readership. These are books right now, these three are really up there on the top of my stack every month. I've become a huge Swamp Thing fan. I've become a huge Animal Man fan. Frankenstein. And I love rereading these books. Like preparing for this was really great to read 0, 13, 14, and the annual. Just to really delve into Swamp Thing because I'm a fan of, like, not just him, Abigail. I thought Abigail in the Zero issue in that opening sequence, I thought that was Abigail.
Yeah.
At first. I don't know if you got fooled by the same thing. I think it was because of the snow and the fact that the character was cold. She had, I think, the color tones that I'm used to seeing with Abigail. Then when I found out it was Anton, I was like, first I thought it was Abigail turning bad, and then I'm like, oh, no, wait, it's Anton. Thank good. I was so glad that it was Anton. Because I am very protective of the Abigail character, which is a testament to the creative team on this book. They've made me really care about the relationship between her and Alec. And how these are two people that really, because of the nature of them both, should not be lovers. Yet they've become that. And I think one of the heart-wrenching things about this story is how much is between these two, yet they still are protective of each other. They still are drawn together. And you can't help but root to them. That's the Beauty and the Beast kind of romance. Is something I remember the movie. I guess my biggest Swamp Thing, and I'm not saying that I don't know how representative of Swamp Thing this movie was. When I was a kid, I remember seeing the Swamp Thing movie with Adrian Barbeau. Did you ever see that one?
No.
And I don't know how representative it is of the Swamp Thing story, and I remember enjoying that as a kid with the concept. But that was kind of that, she fell in love with the Swamp Thing and kind of got to see through the beast the heart that was there as well. And I always liked that. I thought that was something that was an interesting concept. And it wasn't him being turned into this charming prince. He still was the Swamp Thing. Yeah. You're basically dating a salad.
Pete Moss.
Yeah. Which is, I think it's really, really great. There's something cool about that where it isn't like this story that ends. When you're a geeky nerd and you're not going to turn into a charming prince and you see like a salad dating a girl, it gives you hope. So there's something charming about the storyline saying, hey, women really can cut through and see somebody for who they really are. If a salad can get a date, maybe I can too.
See, that actually has the opposite effect of me. I'm like, man, a salad's getting a date. How bad am I? This isn't encouraging. This discourages me.
Well, have you tried like a different brand of ranch dressing instead of Speed Stick? Because it like seems to be an aphrodisiac.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really liked about this Swamp Thing in the opening, it's not our Alec Holland, but I liked that concept that the green's about healing. And that when you see somebody in danger and in hurt, it's not just about healing the trees and the grass and the flora. It's also about taking care of the animals and people. And I count people in the animals. Anything that's a living thing. That there's something about that concept of these forces of nature working in the DC universe, and I like that it's not just working on our Earth. We see these things happening on Earth too, as well. So in different ways, they're manifesting themselves in different ways over on that planet. So there's a lore that's being developed here in the DC universe in the New 52 that wasn't present before or didn't look the way it does now. And that's something that's kind of neat as well, with the transition to this different world, which I'm really liking. I'm liking the idea of the red, the green, and the rot.
Yeah, this is, again, talking about just the combinations and just the overall, you have these different sections working together, and it's a weird, we always talk about the Bat family, we talk about the Superman family, and we have this supernatural sort of connectability here. They're not the same title. They're not, Animal Man didn't train with Swamp Thing, but there has that common ground. They have that connectability. And then you have the whole with the red, the green, just the working together. And I like seeing it's the Life family, if you will. It's that whole entity that it's not just plants aren't just these plants. They're not just inanimate objects. There is a life force to them. And it's kind of neat seeing, just that, the whole feasibility between, the animals and the plants working together. You have the avatars. You have just this, growth and, renewal and just, it rebounds and it comes back. There's always, it's that the hero montage, that life always finds a way, that you always persevere, you keep going. We see that through both of these stories. Especially, I'm really seeing a strong hero concept coming out of Swamp Thing, and I really enjoy that in a title. I'm getting Superman moments in Swamp Thing. I'm getting those cool moments in Animal. I'm getting them in these titles, and that's just, it's what I enjoy in a comic book. It's what I enjoy in my superhero comic books, and I'm getting it, but just a little different taste of it.
I like the idea that the former Swamp Things become a part of that Parliament. And that Parliament's kind of the source of the green, the highest possible zone of it. And the closer you are to it as a Swamp Thing, Alex starts to learn he can draw off of that power. And there's something to that. You're stronger there. The farther away you get, and the closer you get to the source of power of the rot, you're going to be at a disadvantage. So you've got this, like, as you're saying, this super strong Swamp Thing in this story that we see being huge, but then there's a weakness, like we see with this Swamp Thing here when Anton manages to show up with it. He's clearly not in tune with the Parliament because his head's bitten off. Now here's, I've got to question Anton's thinking here on a couple of different things. First of all, if you looked like that, how often are you really dropping the skin? Because you got to question that. Is there some? Obviously, he's very comfortable with himself that he would do that, but he makes this statement: "Please don't yield. Your kind tastes so much better when you fight." But then bites his head off. Like, I was expecting him to want some form of fight, and there was really no fight. I quite liked it because it was really creepy. And this is something that's been established with this character actually in multiple series now with this Rotworld story arc, is just how powerful Anton Arcane is. If you're going to do a crossover like Rotworld, where you're setting something up with a scope and scale that it is going to change the DC universe potentially, where if it doesn't end well, this could be what our world is, you've got to make me believe that this is somebody powerful enough to do that. And when he takes a character like Swamp Thing that we've known in this series to have, for 12 issues, this kind of power, and the power is again being shown more and more, increasing when he's closer to the Parliament of Trees, this is something that I really, really enjoy when you see how easily Anton takes care of the Swamp Thing there, because it really set the tone for me. Wow, Swamp Thing's pretty tough, but look at this guy.
Oh, yeah, this is a nice, sinister, creepy, nasty villain, but it's also the intelligent villain. It is the strategery of evil that is coming off of him that I'm really enjoying about him. It's one of my favorite things about Lex Luthor is the fact that he is, just that master, planner. That he's just that, Luthor has that level of just coolness of being a villain. Well, Arcane has that same level of coolness. I really enjoy what, it's completely different. I'm not saying the two are the same type of villains, but it's, he definitely has a higher creep and sinister factor with the peeling back face, biting off heads of living salads, and then just jumping from the body of that little girl into the body of his one buddy, then going into Alex's wife. He's an equal opportunity evil that, whatever suits his purpose, he's going to do it, but it's not even just, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to gut you. I'm going to really make it hurt. I'm really going to stick the knife. I'm going to twist it. I'm going to really put a hurt on you. And I love seeing that level of just nastiness out of my villains. If you're going to have a super powerful hero, you need a super powerful villain.
The creep factor, too, of wanting the hunt. I've killed them when they're at the height of their powers, both the red and the green. When you see that cross page, that was something that I really liked. The sense that this is what I'm really looking for here. And there's times where he will see things that both sides are doing and let them bear fruit so that he can take advantage of them when it suits his needs and what his overall goals are. And I like that kind of villain as well. I wanted to see one of them bite. I wanted to see one of these characters bite your head off when you were using the word strategery. But I'm taking the joking out of it. I totally echo your idea that I like these villains where they're sinister and they've got a brain and they've got a plan. And, it's not just about how powerful they are. There's something scarier when they're powerful, horrific, and intelligent.
Yeah.
and confident enough to let certain things happen because they can see an A to B path of it that they can influence. And that's something that, like, manipulation like that is creepy on a heavy level, and I really like that about Arcane. This is becoming a villain in the DC universe that I'm really, really enjoying and would love to see, bearing how this story plays out, at some point, him to have interaction with other characters in the DC universe to see how they would handle him.
Yeah, he's one of those characters. He's a definite hero that I think if the regular everyday DCU people got to know him, they would recognize, okay, this is a true hero. He's got that true hero style and just that presence to him. But
villain,
what
villain? You've called him like a hero like 3 times.
I get. My mindset is
he's a hero to me. Once he starts biting off salads heads, I can get behind that.
I hate salads. I actually said hero. Oh God.
You know what I liked, going off of what you're saying here, with that sequence where you see him controlling that person, but that person's got Arcane in a bag, and he's a disembodied brain with running around on it looked like a really twisted version of Cousin It from the Addams Family. That hand, like, running around, like, killing people. I'm like, killing babies.
Killing babies. That just adds a whole nother level of evil to this guy. That, it's one thing to do the, kill him, head-to-head battle, mano-a-mano, or even coming to them when they're first getting their powers and they're not completely strong with it. Okay, yeah, you're taking advantage of it. He's killing babies. He's going at them before they're actually any, type of development, any type of anything. I was like, wow, that is a level of evil.
A character who can become anybody, by wearing their skin after they kill them, that to me is... when you get into horror comics and you've got that's something that adds... I don't get scared easily. I don't get freaked out easily. That's freaky to me. Because the idea that person could then pose, if they knew enough information, or could glean enough information, could pose so effectively as a wife of a character like what happens here with Alec Holland. There's something about that's scarier to me than anything else, because of how close that person could get to you to do things to you that wouldn't normally happen. And what we see happen to Alec here in the lab, how he starts getting to be horribly burnt, and this was Anton's way of putting Holland in a position where there's nothing the Parliament can do to protect the character. They can't bring him back because his body's been so horribly burned that they've got to really get clever to try to outwit what Arcane planned. I loved how that all played out, just how vicious it was from a villain standpoint.
Yeah, again, it went beyond just taking out the bad guy, taking out your enemy. It went to, he really wanted to stick it to the Parliament. He really wanted to, it's stopping their current and their future. And again, it just shows a beautiful nastiness to this guy that I'm really enjoying this villain.
But I like the idea that they were patient, they waited, and the reason why there was no Champion of the Green for the longest time is they bided their time. The chemical burns that happened to Alec Holland, they played it off. They kept going until there was an opportunity for them to resurrect him, which is something that we saw in the series. I love how this material predates everything that we've read before, but plays right into the major events that we're seeing right now. This is the great thing about having a writer on a series long term, where they can lay fruit to something like this over a year, and we're seeing the payoffs now and going, oh, that's where he was going with all this. And somehow it makes the series even, a series that I was already digging, now it's a must read. Like, before, I'm not saying that this series was ever on the chopping block. It was always a really great series to me, but now it's like, it's a step above that. This is on my short list of really enjoyable books. And I agree with what you were saying earlier, how, that a lot of that can be interchangeable with Frankenstein and with Animal Man in this. But this series is one that really has surprised me how attached I'm becoming to the character of Swamp Thing because of how well he's being written here. And just, I think one of the great things is I'm enjoying this ride monthly over more than a year span now. So I've gotten to gradually get to know the character, and my interest in him has grown over time. Something they've done very successfully with the New 52 with a lot of their books is the clever creative teams they're putting on them. And my attach rate to a lot of these characters is because the concepts are ones that they're fleshing out and launching in ways that I think are just fantastic. This book, I mean, when you see that hand coming out of there 5 years later, how cool is that? This means like a lot of this stuff happened, I'm guessing, around the time of Superman's. You know, what happened to Alec was stuff that was happening around the time of Superman's first appearance.
Yeah, it'll be, yeah.
So, you know, again, adds the sense of we're developing a continuity, a timeline, which I'm a fan of. You know, a timeline being developed in a universe. So we can kind of see when things happened historically in relation to each other. And I don't know, I'm kind of fun with the whole thing.
Yeah, I want to see Swamp Thing interact with the other heroes as well. I want to, you know, and especially the heroes that he's killing in Rotworld. You know, because I'm assuming everything will get fixed, everything will get set right, and the dead heroes will be back, and the world will be clean and fine and whatnot. But I don't know how it's going to happen yet, but I'm assuming that's all going to happen. And I'd kind of like to see him interacting with people that he had to crush and destroy.
What will the cost be?
Yeah.
You know, to bring the world, what will it take to bring the world back? Because they've got to actually go backwards, right? On some level? Somehow they've got to stop it before it happens, somehow? I don't know how you do that. So
that year that they spent in the rot world that, you know, caused the rot to rise up and whatnot, they got to redo that somehow, and I don't know what they can do, or I don't know what they're going to do, and that's, I think, part of my real enjoyment of Rotworld. That I don't know, you know, normally I'm like, I think they'll probably do this. Normally I have a theory or an idea. I have no idea going into this. Every time I get a new issue is when I'm going, oh, okay, oh, neat, oh, yeah. There's just a complete shock and surprise for me because I can't just, you know, grasp it, or I don't know. It's some weird, I don't know enough of the universe to throw out a theory, to throw out an idea. So I'm just sitting back waiting for them to give me the information.
In issue 13, we're starting to see people who are potential survivors of what happened here. The one thing I love about seeing Poison Ivy with Deadman is not just that it makes sense that Poison Ivy's there, because this would be an affront. Anything that would be attacking the Green would be an affront to something that's near and dear to her. But I love that right from that opening panel with Swamp Thing, and from the cover as well, you see that the rot's affecting her right arm.
Yeah.
And that was something that a visual right away, seeing that, like, okay, something has changed. Because we didn't know before that the world had shifted the way that it has, on the level that it has. That is one of our first clues that, whoa, something's happened.
Yeah, that, and obviously Poison Ivy makes sense. And I always like seeing when she's not just your quote-unquote classic villain. There is an intelligence to her. There is a reasoning behind her. Yeah, she's often misguided, and she'll go to an extreme to protect the planet. Right here, this is a battle where she should be fighting, and she's right there in it. But she doesn't lose any of that Poison Ivy edge. She's not, golly gee willikers, mister, let me help you out. No, she's Poison Ivy. She will kill you without batting an eye or thinking twice of it if it's to save the planet. So right from the start, we're seeing that same edge to her. And actually, she's probably a little bit more jaded. She's probably a little bit nastier just because of what she's seen and what she's had to do to survive.
And assumptions. Assumptions about things that she doesn't know, because they're assuming the two of them disappeared, almost running away from their responsibilities and what was happening, not understanding that they were trying to stop things, but that they were pulled into a trap. Because they went into the rot world, it left this whole place unguarded. So I'm wondering if that's what they have to do. They have to stop themselves from going to rot world, right? Wouldn't that be the way to prevent this?
Yeah, or when they go into the rot world, you do the double, you have your current timeline goes into the rot world. The future people come back at the point in time when they go in the rot world, so the world still has a defender. So in reality, there will end up being two Animal Mans, two Swamp Things.
But then it starts, if that's the case, then you get into the whole paradox. But if they never have gone in there to begin with because they put a stop to all this, then...
Right. Again, this is why I'm not coming up with theories, because I'm like, I don't know.
No, I love that kind of stuff because there's...
Well, no, I've had these conversations with myself multiple times about this different stuff. Mm-hmm. Actually, even one time, you start, and it's one of the things I do to help me think, things through is I'll actually jot stuff down and I'll draw little diagrams and, flow charts and whatnot. And I actually started trying to figure out what they could do, and then adding the whole Frankenstein thing in there. We'll hopefully we'll get the Frankenstein today. We can talk about some of the stuff they're doing over there, like where can that play into this? And we have soul energy, and we have this, and we have the green and the red, and is this maybe the is maybe this an antithesis to the rot? Is just trying to figure out where Frankenstein plays into this whole mix, and it's just. I kept confusing myself. I kept, driving myself crazy. So that's really when I just sat back and said, no, I'm done trying to think of what's going to happen. I'm just going to let them tell me the story.
There's a lot on the net. A lot of times there's the negativity about editors and the relationship between writers and editors and stuff like that. And I think when you see stuff like this, I would imagine, and this is me from the outside looking in, making an assumption. So I want to preface this by saying that. I would imagine a lot of this, though, we can pat on the back the relationship between the writers and editors involved with these books in tightening that you can, like, in your head do a flow chart. You know what I mean? That these stories do feel like they interconnect. There isn't that jarring moment where you're like, wait, that doesn't make sense. How could this be happening here? I never felt that with reading any of these books. I don't think it mattered what order I read which one in. It didn't matter if I read Swamp Thing first or Animal Man first, Frankenstein first. And I read them in a different order than we're doing this now. Like, I didn't start with Swamp Thing when I went through. I started with Animal Man. And then I think I went from Animal Man to Frankenstein, then to Swamp Thing.
See, actually, I started off with Swamp Thing.
But I don't think it doesn't matter, does it?
No, actually, 100% it doesn't matter. But I think I always, because for some reason, just with the rot and just the green, I always was drawn there. So I was going Swamp Thing. I usually went Swamp, Animal, Frankenstein. Was usually kind of like a reading order. But that's, again, a beautiful part of it. You don't need it. You've got, the Red Kingdom, the Green Kingdom. You have the different kingdoms, the different parts and factions of the story, so you don't need to do that.
That's something I really enjoy about the way this is being crafted, is because you're mirroring things that are going on and you're showing a different picture of it, you can read it in any order, and it's just kind of cool that way. When Dead Man goes into Swamp Thing, does Swamp Thing expel him? Get out of me? Was that him talking to Dead Man or pushing Dead Man out?
I think that was him talking to him. I think that was him saying, hey, get out now. Okay, you've gotten what you want. I don't like this. Leave now.
Do you think I'm guessing I guess my question is, with the nature of his powers, does he have the ability that he could have ejected Dead Man from himself? Because
I think
he's not human the way that we normally think. So I guess to me there was a power in that moment for him to be alert enough to just go, get out of me. And then I was like, wait a minute, did he actually push him out, or is he capable of doing that? And I'm with you. I'm not quite sure, if it was in fact us seeing him push him out. I really liked that I was thinking through to myself, though, what did happen there? And could he do it? And I agree with you. I think that he could push him out if he wanted to.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'm 100% convinced. Just the power levels that he has, I think he could have done it. And something that, I really just have to say, I love this story, but the artwork of this book is something that really has me, and I'll say this for all the titles, but for some, especially with the Swamp Thing, I'm loving just how the layouts are never the traditional block and panel. It's a free flow. It kind of fits, an organic, fits, a green world, and just full on art, with the art team, with the colorists, with everything on this. I'm really enjoying the look of it. I'm enjoying the story I'm getting as well. I just had to give, just because that's something that, again, when I can sit back, when I do my art read, I can sit back and just, whoa, and you kind of, it's a whole nother experience, a whole nother part of the story is just the visual pleasing of what I'm getting.
Abigail in this storyline, I was constantly worried about her. The plane ride, where you see her heading back, and then you see, obviously, what's happening with the rot coming to fruition while she's on a plane. That's another scare. Like, I like flying. I have no problem with flying. But there's a part of me, I don't know that I'm necessarily a person who has a ton of claustrophobia, but I do in the sense of feeling trapped in something if something were to go wrong. Like if I was in an airplane and there was something going wrong on it where it was crashing or I would be more worried about that than if I got into a car accident. Because in a car accident, you have a lot of control of being able to get out of the vehicle yourself. When you're in a plane, a lot of that control is taken away. You're really because of how high up you are, you're really trapped that you can't do much to control your situation. It's just going to be what it is. And there's something about that I find creepier. And when you see this sequence of events where this is taking place in an airplane, something that didn't scare me in the Zero issue is scaring me here. In the way that this kind of rot manifests itself.
Yeah, and the rot can be everywhere because there is death and decay in every aspect of life. And I think that is a neat concept that they've explored in this title, and we're seeing here just why it's able to grow so quickly, why it's able to take over people so quickly, why it's able to throw down and do what it does. You look at just anything that is living, there is a piece of decay within it. Within people, there are cells dying. You find somebody who's got some type of disease or fungus or whatnot growing on them. There's some form of death and decay within, right smack dab in the middle of life. And you see it just, explode on that plane. And that was another wonderful creep factor of, whenever you see this stuff like gushing out of the mouths and kind of, coming at you. You just start thinking, okay, if I was like in a building, if I was in a house, I could run, and you keep maybe I can stick and move, bob and weave. Well, you're in that, that closed in, confined space. There's nowhere you're going. It's right then and there. If you don't have a way to take it out right there, you're in trouble.
Oh, absolutely. And we see one of the things I really like about how this storyline plays out, when we see Alec in the present day meet up with the Parliament of Trees in that one area that is the only living place left. And you see him when he eventually gets into I'm guessing the astral plane, kind of like what we see in X-Men with Charles Xavier, when he goes into people's heads and you see him interacting with that person there and he's walking around when he was in the wheelchair and stuff. I get the idea here that we're seeing Alec's essence. That's why we see him as Alec meeting with the Parliament. Them not recognizing him at first because of the time that has passed and how they've been weakened. Them then having a discussion with him about what has happened and that this area is the only area that's a refuge still from the rot. But if this area gets taken over, they're done. It was something that there was an intensity there. And it's also our first real, in this series, view at what befell the heroes. That they tried to stand their own, but they were gradually overtaken. And, as they were overtaken, that led to them infecting other heroes and taking down other heroes, which is why we see so many of them. And that's important to establish in this when you're seeing power hitters like Supergirl fall. How does that happen, a Kryptonian? Well, there was a metahuman help to what was going on there. And there was something that seeing Supergirl be pulled into this was the first thing that added, I think, just another layer of freak factor to this whole thing. Yeah.
And, I like seeing the full Teen Titans get pulled in, for the exact same factor. That exact same stuff you're saying. Once the one team member goes down, the next one, and it's, there's going to be that you get one, once you get your foot in the door, you're going to be able to spread through them all. And once you got two, okay, boom, and it's just, it's the escalation. They tell two friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. It
was interesting how what happened to Abigail was something they had to strategically figure out how and when to tell Alec. Because they need to keep him strong because if he's not strong, they've got a huge problem. He is their only hope at this point. So, and he's in a similar position, and we'll talk more about it when we get to Animal Man, to Animal Man. They both, as the year passed, their world and what is important to them has been turned on the end. So the thing that drove them before to protect the world in many ways is gone or has been diminished on some level. And they've got to find another reason to go on, another thing to drive them past their hurt, past their sense of loss. And that's, you mentioned before how you get a true sense of hero from this. That, to me, gives me a true sense of hero. When you see them, clearly what happened to both of them should affect them emotionally on huge levels. But we still see them find ways at the core to press on. Even when there's that part of them that wants vengeance, there is that other part of them that finds a way to continue to press on and do the right thing. That is a sign of a hero. When something, is so horribly hit upon you like that, and you still find a way to get past it. And that, I agree, when you said that before with the hero thing, I'm like, oh my God, I so connect with him on this, because these are true heroes in a way that's very different from what we expect from a Superman and a Batman, for example.
Yeah. And one of the things that I did really enjoyed was, because you mentioned how they had to pick the time to tell him about what happened. I love the pacing on letting us, the reader, know how it happened, what happened, what played out with her. Again, that was a great storytelling of just, okay, here's your teaser, here's his building. And then it took a couple really issues to go through everything, to go through the story, to go through her story and give us a little taste here, a little taste here. Shows, oh, okay, yeah, she survives. Guess what? Here, it was a building process. And again, that's another sign of a great story being told. This is a story that began a year ago. For all practical purposes, this really began, once the New 52 launched, and I love just this growth, and it's very appropriate that a plant-based superhero has a very strong growth and a very solid roots to the character.
Again, I'm going to give Anton Arcane your address, and I'm going to tell him you're the new I'm going to say you are a hybrid avatar of the red and green to make sure he really does a number on you after that.
With the dead lawn in my front yard, he will know I have nothing to do with the green.
Well,
I killed grass, dude. Come on.
No, I'm going to tell him that he'd been to your, because I'm not convinced that Arcane, has the greatest memory in the world either. I think he's got, singular focuses. So I'm going to convince him that he's visited your yard before. That's why it looks the way it does. No, that was you, dude. Because when we do see Arcane, I actually really, jumping back to the beginning of the Zero issue, when we saw the girl version of Arcane, when Arcane was wearing that girl's skin, pick up the flower, and it withers instantly. And that's, that Swamp Thing is taken aback, realizing, who in fact Swamp Thing's dealing with. Yeah. At the end of this issue, when we find out that Abigail Arcane is dead, something that, like you said, pacing wise, we as the readers find out a little bit before Swamp Thing, then it leads to that cool annual.
Yeah.
Because the annual for me was really important because it goes back to that romance, and we realize that the romance that we have been reading in Swamp Thing's book was not the first time Alec and Abigail fell for each other. There was a history there to the two of them that predates what happened to Alec Holland when Alec got burned up.
Yeah. Well, it predates everything. Predates his marriage, predates that life. He was still a beginning young student. He wasn't even actually a doctor yet. He was still, studying. He was just, the introduction, really, of him as a scientist. And there was already that connection. There was already that passion and that fire towards it. And I love seeing the young Alec actually just start looking at things. He has no, exposure to this evil, so he's going to look at everything at face value, but going, hey, what's this? This isn't odd.
Here's the question. I like when you have this, not the question, it's more of a statement on what I really like about this. I like when you have this romance that seems to keep finding its way back again. It's one of the things, what I love about the romance between Hawkman and Hawkgirl. I love the concept that throughout different lives, no matter what happens, no matter what might keep them apart or from meeting, that these two lovers would find their way back to each other again. And gradually, the love was so strong that they would recognize who they actually are. You know, that they were Katar and Shaira and that they had all this history. And I like that kind of stuff. Yeah. Same thing happens here with this idea that Alec and Abigail were destined to meet. They were destined to fall in love. And that those feelings that they have for each other keeps bringing them back together, even when something major and horrid separates them. And there's something that I find interesting about that. There's that part where he's sitting here saying, I can still feel her. And they're saying, well, maybe you feel this memory that they start playing out for us. And there's that part of me that's going, yeah, I think there's a truth to that. But I think there's also the other side of it that he does, in fact, still feel her. And I wouldn't, with their relationship, I would never bet on what's real and what's imaginary between them, because usually it's going to be the thing you think is real that's the imaginary thing, not the other part. And there was something I really enjoyed about how that played out.
Yeah, it's one of the things I always love about the Lois and Clark relationship. Yeah, is you've got this, you understand why he would be in love with her. You understand why she would be in love with him, and they always fit. With these two, you have two completely opposite ends of the spectrum. You have two people who should not be together. One's Avatar of the Green, one's the Rot, one's Death and Life. But when they're together, there's a strength. They give each other strength. They give each other, a reason to continue the fight, to push past the darkness that's inside them and embrace the light. And I loved, the fact that it is this relationship, it is this, this existence that shouldn't happen, is what is such a strong point for both of them. And it's not just Swamp Thing who feels her. She feels his presence. She gets strength from him. He gets strength from her. And I love it's a really cool concept, and a really nice way to approach this quote unquote forbidden romance.
Yeah, I like the fact that on both sides, Anton Arcane and the Parliament would not be supportive of these two being together, because it's funny how it's unnatural, in their eyes. But yet for me, I'm kind of like, I love the idea of a love that goes beyond the beliefs and expectations of others. Yeah. Something that just surpasses what others may consider right, and it's something pure between them. I want to see them together. Yeah, I want to see this on some level work between them. I don't know where this is going to go between the two of them, but if anything actually truly happens, where Abigail can't be brought back as a part of all this and being with him, I think it'd be a travesty, because I just love the concept of it. I like that something separates them, and it's clear that they're going to constantly deal with things that separate them. And I think some of that might wind up between the two of them, wind up being philosophical at times, down the road. To have her not in the book, I think would be would go against strategery of developing a good series and supporting cast. I think we're going to see Abigail Arcane continue to be a major part of this series. I hope, because I love the character.
There's no doubt in my mind. And it was funny because when they initially said, "Oh, she's dead," I'm like, "There's no way she's dead. There's no way they killed her off. There's no way, she's still around." I didn't know how it was going to happen yet. I didn't know how they were going to, reveal it. But I'm like, I was right along with Alex saying, no, she's still alive. I can feel it. I can sense her presence. She's still going to be there. She's too much of this book. There's too much about her that is, he needs her in the title. And I'm not saying that he couldn't hold the title on his own. The character isn't interesting enough. No, the character is interesting enough. The character is wonderful character. And if they had to remove her from the book would still be a great book. But it's just there's so much more that she brings to the title. There's just so many different variations that this book can go to that she needs to be there.
I like when we see Alec in that castle and how this is another trap laid for him by Arcane. And this is a trap, again, that you're mentioning, predates everything that we've seen before. So we see how much of an influence on Alex's life Arcane has actually had, and how much of that predates what we as fans already know. And that was something that I found really enjoyable in this sense of you didn't really realize just how long Anton Arcane has been playing around with Alec Holland's life.
Yeah, again, it shows just a wonderful villain. And part of me wonders, with him and aging, is he quote unquote immortal because he's always rotting? So it's like, rotting, living, undead type flesh. So he doesn't have to worry about decay or death because he is the embodiment of death. Does that give him a form of immortality? And same thing kind of go towards Alex. Is the Swamp Thing really immortal? Could he go if he didn't have to deal with the craziness of Rotworld or various villains and whatnot? If he was just hanging out in the swamp, just chilling, would he be immortal?
With Arcane, when Alex led to that place by the minion of Arcane, and Arcane's left to really analyze the situation. I like how I haven't gotten dressed yet, and you see the body hanging up there. This idea that Arcane is surprised by the power levels that Alec's already exhibiting says a lot about the character of Alec. I geek out at that kind of stuff. Yeah. Predate that this feels different and should feel different on some level for the villain. Like, that Alec has the potential to be something more. It also sets up a motivation for why Arcane would try so hard to do what he did do to Alec in his traps.
Well, and it shows why he needs multiple level of attack. Right here, up front, boom. This, he had him really before there was any true connection to the power. He should have been able to kill him off and take him down, but guess what? The green found a way. Alec, unknowingly laid the groundwork for his own defense when he brought when he brought the plant over from Louisiana and threw it in the water, saying, "Hey, this is the most versatile plant known to mankind. If anything can exist here, maybe this will. Here, let's try this." And I like the fact that he would do that type of thing. He would actually say, "Hey, let's try this. Let's go with this." He isn't the Swamp Thing. He isn't the Avatar of the Green here. He's just a man passionate about what he's doing, and he has this connection.
When we see Abigail for the first time, Alec had been going through those strange and unusual flowers. And using flowers has to be a very loose term.
Quote-unquote flowers.
Yeah, because there's something far more interesting than that in how they were crafted. But then we see him meet Abigail for the first time, and I love that she seems, compared to what we see of her in the present day, she's a lot more girly girl, a lot more relaxed and happy, or so it seems, outwardly. She looks different than I would expect from her. And what that does for me as a reader is it shows how much hardship and then growth that this character has gone through. Even if it's not physical, it's also mental. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, there's that sweet and innocence to her that it's at the beginning of the story. And I loved, when they initially showed up, they immediately had that little rapport going back and forth. There was that immediate kind of flirtation. And we get that one cool scene where they shake hands. And it's, again, beautiful artwork, beautiful just layout of everything, where you see the green on his side and you see, the rot on her side. And and he's got kind of like the green etching through his body, and you see the bone and the death and decay on her. And it was a really cool boom moment. And it was like they showed just the energy, the spark between them.
That energy is exactly what I'm talking about. I felt it immediately with the two of them when they were first together early on in the series. To see it coming to fruition now and knowing it, actually, I would love to go back, and I haven't done this yet. I'd like to go back to the beginning and start rereading to see, knowing what I know now, how it changes my perspective on everything that led up to this. Because we'll know now that these events predated all that stuff.
Yeah.
Meaning, when he first meets her. And that was something that I really enjoyed them bringing up here.
Yeah, and we've thrown this out a couple times, but this has just been a beautifully laid out story. And it's getting turned up to 11, and you're seeing just the layout, and just even this late, quote unquote, late in the game, and we're right in the middle of the beginning of this Rotworld story. Okay, let's throw some more little surprises. Hey, let's throw some more little sneak peeks. Oh, by the way, boom, here's another one for you. And it was something I was like, dang, this is a really cool, and this is one of those things that I really enjoy this annual. I like it being part of the connection and building and growing for the future of the story. This was, yeah.
I liked when the two of them were walking. We start getting them sharing stories about their past history, their family histories, different things like that, where the two of them are gradually getting to know each other. If you're going to show a situation where you've got a girl like her, you can tell from the look on her face that there's something comforting about her in the way she's presenting herself, and there's an innocence there. And it's something that, like, knowing her later, it's cool to see her this way, and then to see... It makes me believe right away that somebody like Alec would start opening up to her immediately, because she's clearly opening up to him and is comfortable with that. And I like how there's that spark. It's cheesy and goofy and all that, but I love that kind of love at first sight concept when there's some substance behind it. It means something more when you see it in the way that they interact later. And you start to see it here in these sequences, and that's something that I really enjoyed as well. I like the artwork with the skull on that hill top too. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off because I know you want to go to a point. I want to make sure I haven't talked too much about the artwork in this, and I'm just going to make this general comment, then I'll let you go on with yours. Just how beautiful this book was, but I liked as I read it again. That was something I noticed on a second read through. I did not notice that the first time because I was so focused on the two main characters that I wasn't really diving into the scenery. I'm sure that was there mentally as an image in my head subconsciously because I would have looked at that panel. But to see it now and get more out of it because I knew that in another read through and it really hit me is something that I really appreciate, the work that people put into putting together tiny details on a page that set a mood and a tone. Because it's a very beautiful place, but that adds this ominous sense of foreboding to what's going to happen with these two down the road.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, and the thing I liked is the fact that I got still some beautiful artwork here, but this is a different style than what I'm getting in the regular series. And as much as I really enjoy the regular series, I'm equally enjoying this. But we have two different art styles. We have different layout styles. But it wasn't jarring for me. I wasn't like, what up? Part of it is because this is a good, flashback sequence. But also, it's good. If you get good artwork, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with a different art style. I'm okay with things, kind of shifting around if I'm getting something neat. And I really, this is another, just even the regular, just the pages between the two of them, just that interaction, that friendliness, that calm, that comfort. You see that in their eyes, you see that on their face, and you see kind of just the general body mechanics of them. I can actually kind of, it does really pull me into the story, and you do kind of start forgetting that this is just a two-dimensional, this is just pages. This isn't an actual living, breathing entity in front of me, but you start getting going that, and it's, this has been some really cool stuff, and I like, just the differences. I like, part of me, it compares to with Sarah Connor from the Terminator series. We see her all, oh, goody, golly gee, what's going on here in the first one? And then you get T2, where she's cut, she's hard, she's a warrior. This is, Abby is that style for me. Right here, we're seeing her sweet, innocent, she doesn't know what's going on in the world yet. In the regular title, we see the warrior side of her. We see the fighter, and I like that.
With what's going on with Anton's body and what we see with Abigail, and her talks about how, my uncle is worried about me being poisoned by this radioactivity and stuff like that. It made me worry that maybe Anton's trying to bump her consciousness out and put his in there that's how we get her to be then the Swamp Thing's nemesis. I'm not saying, and let me clarify this, that was one of the things I was thinking. Then there's another part of me that's thinking, well, these two have to wind up together. There's another part of me that's thinking something else. I loved playing through the multiple scenarios and how a situation, just because of the dialogue, made me question, well, what if she couldn't get through that? Not because I really believe that's what's going to happen, because it's fun to go there when the sequence is interesting. This story had so many pages of interest where, I don't know if speculating is the right word, I was enjoying it and kind of playing through my head alternatives. Not necessarily thinking that those alternatives might play out. It was more fun to really enjoy these particular pages that way, and that's why.
Yeah, and to be honest, I can see him trying to bump her consciousness, bump her personality out. We saw earlier in this series where they tried to make her, the harbinger of the rot. They tried to make her, just the entity for the rot and just the decay. So he is definitely playing mind games. He's trying to get her personality out. He's trying to just occupy and utilize her body without cutting off the skin. He wants her physical form to actually embrace and become part of the rot.
Alex experiments, where he's taking a look at this flower and trying to learn something from it and putting in things like chlorophyll to it and seeing what happens. This would be something that's so outside of his realm. I like those scientific experiments because, to me, great horror should have a lab somewhere involved in it. And this is like a real twist. The Flash, when the Flash's book, when his lab chemicals are hit by lightning, he becomes the fastest man alive. For Alec Holland, again, he becomes a salad, and a super salad, if you will. That was something that I love. The character. I have sympathy for the character. I do not want to be Swamp Thing.
Yeah, he's one of the heroes. As cool as I think that he is, I do not want to be Swamp Thing. I would rather be. There's a whole slew of heroes I would rather be than him. Just because he's got. I don't want to say the raw deal, but he did get a pretty raw deal in how has to exist for the rest of his life. Now, with that. With the downside, he does get some serious power levels. And as I was saying earlier, there's probably a good chance he could be immortal. So there is that side of it, but I don't know.
Can I ask you a question about that immortality? Yeah. Are you taking because he could then become a part of the Parliament? That's the immortality? Because we know from Anton that he's biting the heads off of these avatars. So I'm guessing Alec's head is possibly a menu item.
Yeah, when I'm talking immortality, I'm not talking Superman immortality, where he's so powerful and so invulnerable. I'm talking immortality of that if he didn't have to deal with the rot, if he didn't have to deal with people trying to take a weed whacker to him, if he could just sit back, chill, relax in the swamp, I think he would exist forever. I don't think he would, if he didn't have these outside forces attacking him, I don't think there would ever be his death or decay. I think it would be a constant, renewal of energy, renewal of strength. And just, it's like, you think about a giant tree that grows and keeps growing and growing and growing, and it just never stops and spreads out. As long as you don't chop it down or, infest it with, mites and whatnot and fungus, it'll live on forever. It's when mankind is dead and buried, the plants will still be there. The trees will still be there. Nature will find a way. I think that's the kind of immortality I'm talking about with Swamp Thing.
I agree. Actually, that's kind of the way I'm thinking of it, too. When we see Anton meet Alec for the first time, and Alec discovering that this flower can mess with the memory, and it could have long-term effects that way. But then Anton, obviously, being somebody who would play with that and would want that to be the case, because he doesn't want Alec with his sister, and the only way that's going to happen is if he doesn't know that the sister exists because his memory's gone. But in this case, it's not even the memory of the sister being gone. He wants to wipe out Alec. He wants to make him lunch before he's a salad. Apparently, Anton's a meat eater as well, which. But I love the intervention there then from the Parliament. Them knowing what Anton's potential moves could be and them stepping in on behalf of Alec. was something that I really wanted to see.
Well, and it's the foxglove seeds that Alex brought. That's where they got their entry into it. And the Alec wasn't even thinking, hey, let me do this to save my butt. That was literally just him trying to help this landscape, that's quote unquote infected with the radiation. Oh, let's, see what we can do here. Maybe this is a resilient plant. It'll grow. I liked seeing, again, nice little introduction back here. Bam! Here's the reason why we did it. Wonderful storytelling.
And that's super cool to me when you see those moments. And I like the idea that, because the immortality you're mentioning, we see this previous Swamp Thing who is no longer a Swamp Thing and has a limited range and almost is sacrificing itself in this situation to save Alex's life.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, you talk about immortality. I don't know that because they're a part of a parliament. I think if they stay and protect themselves in a certain way, they could be the immortals that you're mentioning. But I think if they go out and make moves like this puts that immortality at risk in that moment. Because I think this one, and Anton knows it, has a limited power span and could be easily wiped out if needed.
Well, and this is the one that he killed before, and just so this one has limited power set, but I don't know. I think it's a cool concept and a cool idea. When you start thinking about just the comfort level and just the level that these two villains, these two oppositions have with each other. And I love just that dialogue between Anton and the pseudo Swamp Thing, where it's not ooh, you drastically cad. No, there is an actual conversation going on between them. There is an actual dialogue. He's like, I've stopped you. He's like, no, you haven't. You really haven't. I really haven't lost today. I've actually won. And because Arcane knows what he's doing. He knows he's thinking long term. Plants always think long term. They got the just the nature of the plant that it's not a quick immediate response. Well, guess what? Same thing with him. He's planning. He's laying the groundwork. He's planting his own seeds of destruction. And I really, it's something I really enjoyed watching and just playing out. This late in the game, this far into the story, bam, we still get more surprises. And it's just something that really, struck a nerve with me and really just struck a chord. I was like, yeah, this is a really cool title. And I'm actually, very glad we're able to talk about it and sit back and we have enough of the Rotworld that it's not just, hey, this would be neat. No, we know what's going on and we're seeing this and there's still some more neat stuff coming down the line.
I love single issues on the show. I love doing those. But then I love when we get the chance to every so often do like multiple issues of a title like this. Because, really with Swamp Thing, when you think about it, we're doing 0, 13, the annual, which is really like 2 issues, and 14. So, we're really dealing, with 5 books, for all intents and purposes of material for Swamp Thing. And it's fun to be able to talk about it in this kind of depth. Because, when you see these moments with him in the Parliament, and they're saying, that this girl was your weakness and stuff like that, and you would have come back to her, they kept that information from him, which means I believe they would do anything to keep him from rekindling that relationship, including keeping information that could save her. Or, if she really was alive, they would also keep that from him.
Yeah.
In order to keep him on the path that they want. And revenge is a motion that better serves their purposes to a certain extent, because it's clear when, he is so violently angry about going after killing, Anton Arcane for what's happened, because that's who he's really blaming, that would be a huge misstep on his part. And because they know that would separate him from being in the green and having, so to speak, this extra power that we were both mentioning earlier, and how neat and cool that whole thing was.
Yeah.
Now we get into issue 14, which is kind of the coup de grace of where we're going. It's amazing how much story depth is in this whole thing, because we get into we forget that Abigail has a brother. Am I the only one that forgot about him? And let me clarify. When I say forgot about him, the second that he showed up, I was like, oh my God, I loved the issue with him. But I like that it's been so long since we've seen him that we've almost had like this calm before the storm with him, to the point where we can kind of put him out of our mind and focus on everything else he's going through. I don't know, maybe you remembered him right away, that like he was somebody that was in the background. I totally forgot about him, and then I was like, oh yes, I'm so glad he's back.
Yeah, I completely forgot about him. I'll be honest with you, and blunt. And every time he makes appearances in this Rotworld, because he makes an appearance in Animal Man, I was like, oh yeah, he's a nice, nasty little monster. And I completely forgot about him. I forgot what kind of role he's going to play in this whole thing playing out and this whole story. And this was, one of those just cool moments. Watching some of my favorite heroes just completely get destroyed. And I loved seeing, Rotworld Superboy, Rotworld, Wonder Girl, Red Robin's thrown in the mix. There's an Impulse, Kid Flash out there getting, head chopped off. There's, some just cool death and destruction going on. But again, it's this beautiful layout of the story that it's, there's some really cool artwork that it's not just, hack slash gore, monster, zombies. No, there's some really neat, presence and artwork and just the physical, action that we're seeing in these two dimensions. This was, again, amazing artwork, amazing enjoyment of this. This is a high praise to all members of this art team, all members of this creation.
One of the things that I really enjoyed was the balance of, I'm usually a big fan of traveling along with the hero and feeling like you're their running buddy. You get some of that in this, where, in finding out about Alec's powers here from the Parliament, we find out with Alec and kind of are going along with him. But I do like the balance of there being so much that we know as readers before Alec. Because we're really more, I think we're traveling more with the Parliament than we are with Alec in the story, because they just seem to know more of what's going on as the observers on the outside. And in this series, it really works for us to know some things that Alec doesn't. But the discovery of, when he's going up toe-to-toe with Superboy, it looks like Superboy's going to have his way with him. And then Alec finally connects to the power of the Parliament. And you see him turn giant and stomping out the Teen Titans, to the point where he's even referencing later that some of them might still be on his foot. What a great sequence that was.
Well, and even like the Rot, right as Superboy's just giving the beatdown, they're like, hey, look, green turns to red. I was like, oh. Again, nice little villainous, evil taunting. I was like, this had so many aspects of just where it was little funny bits of moments, little funny on the good side, on the bad side, but then you get these awesome action sequences then, plus you get this story that's growing and developing on its own. So you have fun, high action moments, but you got a solid story that's a foundation. So it's not just about the goofy, it's not just about the funny, it's about the whole total picture.
Am I the only one that doesn't want to see Abigail become something other than like the girl that she is? Because and don't get me wrong, I don't mind if she turns into this like skeletal thing or some form of creature of the rot with her and Alec. But I kind of like the idea that for us as the readers, we see that is her destined path. But I almost want to see the love between the two of them keep that from happening to her. Kind of that idea that they're violating the natural order of things by being together and being in love with each other. That maybe that will keep the rot in check, so to speak, if Anton can be taken down, that relationship would do that. Yet I see something, almost a tragic love, possibly happening between the two of them, where we see a tragedy in how this resolves that could keep them apart. And I don't know what that's going to look like, and I really want to be wrong, because I'm rooting for them as a couple. Like, in a very short period of time, this is a couple that means something to me on a big, deep level. I know we keep referencing the two of them. I don't know how you can't, because I think this is something where he will have a connection as time goes on, even more and more, with Animal Man and his concept of family and caring for those he loves. It does make the two of them, uniquely for all their differences, similar. Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah. And one of the many theories that I threw out in my head, and I'm going to preface this this is just a running concept, a running idea that I have. So I'm not saying this is what must happen, nowhere near that. But you look at the rot, and the rot is death, decay. It's the antithesis of life. Well, the opposite obviously is, you think, oh, it's the green, it's the red. No, it's that mystic energy. It's that soul. It's that life essence that both the green and the red occupying. They have pieces of it. They just have it in different formats. What if for her, for them to actually defeat, the rot, you need the life, you need the energy, you need that light, to take out the darkness. And maybe she's the gatekeeper for that. So maybe there's a way for her to survive. Maybe there's a way for those two to be together where she's not the rot. She ends up being the light. She ends up being the avatar for the life, not for darkness.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what's going to happen with her. I don't know. It's funny, you mentioned running theories that you have and stuff like that. I find that I have a lot of them, and I find that I have a lot of them that contradict each other when it comes to them. Just because, depending on the sequence that I'm currently reading, I think of places that it may go. So I'm with you on this. Like, when you talk about running theories, I don't know that I have one. I think I've got 70. And I'm pretty convinced that, like, all 70 of them could be very wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm enjoying that sense of mystery and suspense, supernatural mystery and suspense. I love mysteries in comics. I love when stories unfold gradually like this. I love that this has a little tweak and twist to it that makes it feel very, very different than other presentations like that. The debate between Poison Ivy, the Parliament, and Alec, with her again, and many times showing her bitterness towards Alec, but easing and being more vocal now, I think, as she's opening her mind that, okay, maybe a lot of my assumptions for him were misguided, but she's still tentative about all that. It's a feeling out process that she has, trying to shock him back into a sense of responsibility. But as he's explaining his viewpoint, he's almost making a selling point to her and Deadman, where they eventually start going, well, maybe we should help him. Maybe he is right. Maybe we shouldn't just sit here and be victims. Maybe it's time to actually do something. And if we're going to go out that way. I kind of like that sense when heroes go together and they kind of see somebody else's side of it.
Yeah. It's, again, you do, and there's also the other side of that where they're saying, well, as long as he's there, they're going to keep throwing more heavy muscle at the Parliament, and eventually there could be a fall. Maybe there's, she can hold the ground. She can, they can, she and the little veggie versions of Swamp Thing, could actually hold the ground while he's doing it. This is the only chance they have. You got to take the fight to them. And as soon as he started saying it, I knew it was going to happen. You knew he wasn't going to just sit back and do nothing. He had to step out there. It's the path of the hero. But I like the fact that there was the debate about it. There was the argument, but he did put his foot down and say, no, this is what's happening. This is what's going to go on. I hear you, but I'm not listening. I'm moving on. This is what I got to do. This is how I got to do it. And seeing Boston go along with him as, the guide, as, there's not much he'll be able to do. He can't occupy the dead things, but he is a presence there. He is a guide. He is a help. There is, logic in having him along, and just he knows the world now.
We haven't seen her die yet.
Who?
Abigail.
Oh, she doesn't die.
Do you think Anton has her and she's not dead?
Yes. I 100% think Anton has her. One, because he knew eventually Swamp Thing would arrive back in the world. He needs his bait for the trap.
And I go back to our theory earlier, too, that there's a possibility that Anton wants to use her body.
Yeah. Another solid theory on that, but I really think she's alive-ish. I don't think she's been affected by the rot because I don't think the rot can get into her. I think she's got some natural immunities just over time that she's developed just because who she is and the exposure she's had. But she's definitely in custody.
William Arcane. Now, is that Aquaman's trident?
Yeah, that's what it looked like to me.
This is my kingdom.
Now, when they talk about the fact that they're heading to Gotham, and they've heard Gotham was hit pretty hard. Don't know, there's somebody at Gotham who's planning it. Now, immediately, everyone's going to immediately think Bruce. Personally, I don't think it's
we
Bruce.
see that, Jim. We see that. Was that Animal Man that was referenced? That Batman set something up, because that's going to bring Animal Man and Swamp Thing together. They're going after whatever Batman was setting up. Remember in Animal Man?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking it's not Batman. I'm thinking it's Damian.
No. But maybe Damian's there. But remember the specific thing that was referenced, that before Batman went down, he had set something up in place. So that's why the Gotham looks like it's going to be the convergence point for
those two stories. Yeah.
Right. So I'm guessing it was something. Maybe we're saying the same thing in two different ways.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing.
I'm convinced Bruce is done for, but that this was something that Bruce had set up before then, and maybe there will be, like you said, a Damian still in place or something, which I would love to see. And I wasn't thinking of who would be surviving, and I think that's where you're going with this. Who's the survivor there? But I'm taking it literally that they're going there because Batman did set something up that they hopefully will be able to use. Because I'm not entirely sure that you can trust that anything will work against Uncle Anton and William Arcane.
Now, here's my question for you. William Arcane, he's alive because he's a part of the rot. He's one of them. He's not a rot soldier. He's not a rotting carcass like the heroes and the other people. Boston should be able to occupy him.
I would like to see that.
Yeah, because that was my first thought when he popped in, because Boston mentions like, hey, I can't jump into these creatures. As soon as we saw William there, I'm like, hey, I wonder if he can jump into him, because probably can't jump into Arcane, Anton, because he's such a manifestation of the rot. But I'm thinking Billy Boy is a definite target for him.
I like the use of Deadman in the New 52.
Yeah.
He's become a character who I like, that he has been shown to have vulnerability sometimes, depending on what magicians he's dealing with and things like that in the particular titles, what their power levels are like. There's something cool about that, because you think because he's a ghost, he's kind of guaranteed to be outside of things. But I don't know what the rules are like for him in the green and the red and with the rot. And as it's coming on more and more, that's something that I'm going to be interested to see what that plays out like.
See, I think he's one of those type of characters where as long as he doesn't try to occupy rotted creatures, they couldn't touch him. They need the physical presence. They need the physical form to go into. Granted, if he doesn't do something, if he doesn't try to help or whatnot, then the world just decays around him and he's got nothing there. But I think he's one of those characters that's kind of protected, from the occupation.
And I think you're 110% correct that could be exactly what the case is. I don't know. I want to see that. That's where those convergences between these books and seeing what happens when these characters finally meet up with the big bads are interesting to me, because I want to learn more about them. And obviously there's a motivation, because he's just not cannon fodder because he's a guest in this book. He's also a part of this supernatural group of titles. So, you've got characters like Jeff Lemire who are involved in this, that is also, would have a reason to be looking out for characters like a Deadman, and what that character's all about. I like the way that he handles the supernatural as well, because Scott Snyder's terrific, Jeff Lemire's terrific. This Matt Kent, who's involved with the Frankenstein book, is just doing a really bang-up job. They've got some great writers involved in these titles that I think are just very interesting in what they're presenting. I think that's why we're getting books that are very different. And I think this team that they've got here is just as strong as your Green Lantern team. They're just as strong as your Bat Books teams, because they really seem to gel well together and play off of concepts that are being introduced by each other in their books. And I think that that's a testament to the writers and editorial working on this book. And then the art, and I don't want to throw the art team, I started thinking of the story development ideas. The art team then, in their own way, is making us as the reader feel this world coming to life. And because you mentioned that earlier, just how it didn't matter that there were shifting art teams because of the annual and all that. It all worked out and set the right kind of tone, mood, and emotion. I want to echo your comments because I thought it was just great. Swamp Thing is one of those titles on my short list that I never... It's not meant to be an insult to Swamp Thing. I never saw myself having... I saw myself being interested in Swamp Thing. I never saw myself having this kind of love for Swamp Thing. And I honestly would go out on a limb and say that, if you got friends, touching on what I mentioned earlier about Gail Simone making mention on her site about books that are lesser known, that get canceled and things like that, I'm going to start... I've always given friends who are like casual comic readers only comics featuring, like, if they're a Batman fan, Batman. If they're Superman fans, Superman. I'm going to start taking a look at what some of my friends like TV show-wise. And here's a great example. You know Jimmy Bradick.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me he's not a guy who would love Secret Six.
Oh, God, yeah.
But that's not something that I would normally think of giving him. Because I would tend to go with, he grew up loving Jonah Hex, so I would give him Jonah Hex. Well, but to me, I've got to start thinking outside that box. And, I've got friends of mine that like Supernatural, the TV series Supernatural. And I think a lot of these books in this line really fit that type of fan.
Yeah, definitely.
That they would find a home here and really dig this kind of story. So I'm going to try this year, for holiday gifts for friends, giving some trades and things to them that, I'll certainly go to one of their old favorites in the characters end because there's certainly a top quality title there to be found. But I'm going to try also to kind of embrace a lot of what she was saying about how, she's sad when she sees a title canceled and give a book, not just a book that I like, but a book that I think fits what they would like, and see how that works out. Because I think there's something neat about that.
Look at those strange little beetles. They look... Great neutron!
Jim, I want to continue our exploration by jumping on to Animal Man number 0. And you know what I really love? It's funny how we talk about how Swamp Thing and Animal Man are part of the same world, but how unique these books feel. Like, it feels like there should be a relationship between these characters because, of the universe that they belong to with that supernatural stuff. But, like, where Swamp Thing gets into, like, more of the Earth-based stuff, we get Animal Man where there's a certain adventure element to what goes on there. Like, we get this other Animal Man with his bird and stuff like that and fighting, and we see Arcane coming after that Animal Man. There's definitely a different tone in what's being presented here to what we saw early in the issue. Like, he comes out as this adventurer, cop, taking care of normal criminals and stuff like that, because he's Animal Man. I really I wanted to know more about this Animal Man, and that's something that, with what they've crafted, with there being multiple avatars, there's opportunities, and I would love to see this in annual formats or specials or something like that, or even one-shot single issues, where they start telling us the history of some of these other avatars, because I want to know more.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of glad that they said 5 years ago. So this is a hero who was around right at the birth, at the dawn of the public dawn of Superman age. So the avatar for the animals, avatar for red, avatar for green, they've been around before the world knew of superheroes. It's kind of, that side of the fact that Stormwatch has been around for so long, that, all these secret societies have been around for so long, that the world just doesn't start at 5 years. That's the public knowledge. That's the public perception of superheroes, was the 5-year mark. So I like seeing the fact that we have this lengthy legacy. We have this other character, this other hero, and I'm co-signing with you that I'd like to know about this guy. I'd like to know where he comes from, or see his groove.
Yeah, and that's one of the neat things about this is, in this issue, these creators, these champions, these superheroes and things like that are out there, there's a distinguishing between what a superhero is and what these avatars are. They aren't the same thing. So his predating Superman, and the idea that this clearly was not the first avatar of the Red, there's more of them, throughout the past. It doesn't contradict that Superman's the first superhero in this world, the first public persona that's been put out there in the way that he is, because these are clearly different types of characters, and it's a different focus than what Superman's doing in the public eye. And I like that distinction, that it's okay to have these supernatural characters that have been around forever, because they aren't superheroes. They're protecting the world in a very, very different way. They're almost a part of nature. I think that's the best way to put it. They're a part of nature, which is distinctly different than what Superman is in what he does as using his powers for the sake of good and becoming an agent of change for society and trying to make the world a better place in its way. These creatures are really here for the purpose of maintaining a balance of order to the nature of things, which is very different than its purpose. That distinction, to me, separates from a DC universe that, like, every book is another superhero book. And I think it separates the books and makes them more unique and more interesting. Why are the Green Lantern books so different? Because I think their role and focus is very different than, per se, Batman, and very different than Superman, very different than Aquaman, very different than these characters. And I think DC's doing a really, really good job of taking a look at the core ideas that made these characters unique and interesting, went back to the drawing board and looked back to the original creators who were creating these and anybody who's worked along the way, and took the best quality elements along the way and said, how can we use those to really define what makes this character unique and interesting, without contradicting what worked for so long with this character, or what, hopefully not contradicting what fans of this character have always liked. Even though we're doing something a little different with them or redefining them or something like that, we don't want to alienate those fans. And I think overall they've done a pretty good job of doing that. I think, sometimes you'll see on forums where there's people who, long for their previous version of certain characters. And I get that. There's characters that I miss from, the pre-Flashpoint DC universe. But I'm loving so much the exploration of characters that, first of all, the ones that I love from the past that are still around, and I'm really digging them. But it is characters like Animal Man with this concept where we're seeing that new Animal Man and seeing Arcane and these gorilla head thing that chomping up the guy, whatever that was. But then seeing the I guess that whole, what do we want to call them? That brotherhood or council or something like that. The totems, is that what it is?
Yeah, the totems.
The totems, yeah, the totems is what they are. Just talking about how to deal with Anton Arcane and what he's doing, and realizing they don't have someone in place to be their champion right now, but maybe to thwart Arcane, and they're doing the same thing that the Green had to do. How do we thwart Arcane? Well, what if we, using the bloodline, escalate things by making somebody be kind of our stand-in for right now. And the real person is going to be the child of this person. And maybe by bringing this person in and making them our fill-in champion, it will escalate all that. I loved that concept, and that's where Buddy Baker comes in, and you see where Buddy Baker's life is right now. And I've always liked that about Buddy. I do think this goes at the core of what I've liked with every Buddy Baker mini. When you and I had a chance to talk about, in the past, some of the Vertigo with Animal Man and stuff like that, and take a look at Animal Man, and take a look at what that character's history has been, I think this is very true to who Buddy Baker was. We see a guy who is an actor who's wanted to have that big role and that superstardom, and it wasn't until Animal Man that he really kind of broke out and people started taking more notice of him, and that life started to become a little better for him. And I love how that duality of being that avatar made him kind of a public eye superhero that was a little bit different. And I love that it's so different than what Booster Gold was. Because I love Booster Gold. I love the concept behind Booster Gold. But Buddy Baker manages to do that whole public limelight thing while still being a family man that we know and love. And juggling, to me, the key of Animal Man is you've got this man who is juggling a really special family who supports him in spite of how much harder their life is with having him in it. And yet he redeems himself by the times he puts his family first when they're in danger and protects them and does the things that he does. But his wife deserves sainthood.
Oh, God, yeah. And it's funny, we talked all the whole time when we're going through Swamp Thing of just the creep factor of Arcane. And just this, again, introduction to him. If you're not reading Swamp Thing, if this is the only exposure you have to Anton Arcane, you see, again, an equally creepy, freaky villain that laid out a beautiful trap for Animal Man. The previous version of Animal Man, where he's got him going and rescuing the chimpanzees or gorillas or monkeys or whatever that thing was that turns into his little buddy, his little walking, chomping head. And again, vicious, violent, bloodied attack where he's just like, ugh, gotcha. And this was another beautiful just ambush by him. And it's one of the things that I'm really digging about this character. But again, it's that improvise, adapt, overcome. Where are we going to go? How are we going to handle this? Well, let's kind of tweak the rules again. Let's change this and go with the introduction of Buddy Baker. And I always wondered why he went public, why everybody knew who he was. Well, kind of seeing who he was before this, it kind of would make sense. This guy is an actor. He is in the limelight. He is, he wouldn't be the type of person who would hide his identity, who would shy away from the cameras. Now, he's not the megalomaniac. He's not an egomaniac like Booster, but he is somebody who's going to be comfortable, who's going to want to pursue that spotlight. He's going to want to walk the red carpet as Animal Man. He's going to want to do that type of stuff, but he is still a good person who's going to actually try to help people and try to do the right thing. I liked seeing that, and I liked understanding why he is who he is. And we get a little taste for it here, but it's enough that it really helped me lock in who Buddy was.
I agree with you. And that's something that I've really enjoyed about this book is I've gotten to know Buddy, and I like Buddy. You mentioned the heroism of and kind of a nobility of Swamp Thing, if I'm right on that, because that's kind of how I see him. Buddy is like your pal. Like, I really like Buddy. I see him as a guy that I could hang out with. I see him as a guy I could watch movies with. I see him as being the guy, when the guys talk about getting together to hang out for dinner and just chat and catch up about old times and stuff. Buddy's that guy. Like, you want Buddy there because he's that dude. And he's going to share, like, not only because he's not perfect. Like Buddy does these great things where you respect him and all that. But there's also the Buddy that makes mistakes like we all do. Where you're like, okay, I did a boneheaded thing, that type of thing. Buddy's that guy. So he's instantly relatable. And I've really enjoyed in this series getting to know him, getting to know his family. I like that his family's not perfect. I like that I really respect Ellen for her strength and the fact that she stands up to him, stands up for him. And a lot of times makes the tough decision because I do think nowadays in our society, marriage, it's become like this rotating thing of, our first answer to marital problems is divorce. And I'm not saying that divorce is a bad I think some couples need to get divorced. They need to move on and just search for a better life. So there's that end of that too. I think, sometimes you just need to get out. But I think there's other times where there's really good couples that if they started talking, and there's times with Buddy, like I could see hanging out with Buddy and going like, listen, dude, you need to talk to Ellen and you need to really inform her what's going on. You need to clue her in. She's an understanding wife, but you can't leave her in the dark because when you leave her in the dark, you stress her out. And when you stress her out like that, and it makes her question the safety of her, the safety of your kids. And that kind of content, everything I'm saying right now, I can imagine myself having these conversations with Buddy, trying to give him advice on how to keep that marriage together because it's become important to me as a reader and as a friend to him. It's a very different experience to reading Swamp Thing or any other book in the DC universe that I'm reading right now. It's funny when, for a long time there's a criticism that Superman was not interesting because of the marriage. It kind of put in a trap. How do you do interesting Superman stories? I think Animal Man is telling you right now how you do an interesting story about a family. I'm not saying Lois and Clark should look like this. Not in a million years. They're two very different people. But I think when you're taking a look at this, I think this book is enhanced because he's married. I think it's enhanced because he's married and has kids. I'm not saying Superman should. I think we're seeing a distinction here. Why is this cool? Why does it work? Very clever use of the family concept and a character who is fallible, yet heroic at the same time. He's heroic in the same way that you talk about Swamp Thing being heroic, but it plays out very differently because of who he is in his life and, and his unique buddiness. And I really have had, we talked about this back when issue 1 came out of this series. Out of the starting gate, I had a love for this book. There was something charming about it, something accessible, something friendly. It is, reading an issue of Animal Man is like hanging out with an old friend, and there's no other way to put it. And everything that goes along with that old friend. You and I have conversations like Buddy has in this book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
About our lives, about our brothers and sisters, and my wife and family and work and all these things that we see go on in Buddy's world. We would have this conversation with him. You and I went to Quaker Steak the one day, just met up to have dinner together. I was going to see Riff Tracks movie, and I'm like, dude, you're right around the corner from there. Let's hang out and have dinner. It was really nice for us because you and I haven't had a chance to do that in a while, where it wasn't about podcasting. It was just about two friends hanging out. And I'm thinking, I'm connecting this book to that evening that you and I had, just sitting and chatting for a couple hours together, because we haven't done that in a while. And I could see Buddy being there with us and being a part of that whole thing. When I don't know who else in the DC universe I totally see that way. And I think there's that unique accessibility to him that makes him a special character. Because am I right? Is there anybody else you can think of off the top of your head that really hits you that way, that is so uniquely human?
Oh, God. Tough call. Part of me says Jaime, but he is more of a kid, though.
That's what it is, yeah.
So he's a bit younger, so it would be the younger friend, the little brother hanging out with you. But there is still a very human side to him. Just that, hey, let's just hang out and chit chat. I think Damien's very approachable that way.
Can I stop you there? I think one of the distinctions with what you're saying, though, is exactly what it is. I think at our age range right now, Buddy is what Jaime is, hopefully, to, and I can't speak to this because I'm not a teenager, to a teenager reading Blue Beetle. Maybe they can look at that and see that that's like hanging out with their friends on that end. Because I think if Jaime is like hanging out with our friends, well, I don't know that we're going to be hanging out with a teenager the same way that we'd be hanging out with guys that are, in families and jobs and more our way. I agree with you on, though, that Jaime's that human.
Yeah.
Damien, wow. Damien's very human. I know you were joking. I'm like sitting here, it dawned on me right now because I was so focused on Blue Beetle that I didn't really focus heavily on the Damien concept. Like, you really threw that into this whole mix. I agree with you on Jaime. Barry Allen, I think to a certain extent, has some of that quality as well. I think Barry's a guy's guy.
Yeah, I definitely throw out Barry in that mix. Mm-hmm. God, it's funny. On the female superhero side,
I was thinking of that too. Is
Barbara,
there some
Babs, definitely, Batgirl.
You know what the problem is that she runs into? I agree with you 100%. I think she's incredibly human. I think the problem she runs into when you're reading Death of the Family right now and where that storyline's going with her, I think that takes her away from the being able to hang.
Yeah, true.
And that's not a knock on that story. I think that makes her unique because I don't think she fits into that category because of it. I'm trying to think female character-wise who would, and I don't know. Do we have one right now that fits in that same place?
That very human side to her.
Barbara is human. I don't want to say that.
No, I know what you're saying. Yeah, it is.
I don't know who could hang like that right now that feels that way. I think that's a character I would like to see.
Yeah,
because certainly not Batwoman. And I love her to death for who she is, but with all her issues,
she does have a little bit of the intense side.
Wonder Woman doesn't fit.
Yeah, on some hands, Power Girl does. Because she's got that, but she also doesn't completely connect to us. Mm-hmm. So I think it would be I think she would be the kind of hero who would want to hang, but wouldn't be able to adjust and know exactly what the hang is.
Right. Zatanna, I think because of the nature of the magic and stuff like that. She would, you know what? I don't know. I think Zatanna could hang.
Zatanna could hang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe Zatanna.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't get that same vibe for her that I do with Buddy, though. You know,
No.
and
None of
I
these are level of Buddy.
Right. I think what I'm saying is, though, with Buddy, he doesn't feel like becoming a superhero has changed him from being one of the guys and being, you know, like just a normal everyday person. When I think of superheroes, usually I think larger than life. Like, they're people we aspire to be, but no, like we can't. Like, Zatanna is a character because of her magic training and stuff like that. She's separated. She's got that kind of thing. Wonder Woman, the same thing. Batgirl, because of her experiences, it kind of separates her. The same thing with the Birds. I don't think there's anybody on Birds of Prey that I feel that way with. I like hanging with them, but yeah. I don't feel like I would be able to. You know, I wouldn't cut it. I wouldn't fit into their group. And I love that. That's an escapist part of those characters. So it's not a knock at any stretch, but I think it is something uniquely Buddy. I'd love to see a female character that fits that way.
Yeah, it just has that comfort level. Hey, how you doing? Yeah.
Maybe, you know who, maybe Amethyst.
Oh, yeah.
Because think about those, that goes back, I think she fits into the Jaime category more. You know, we got the high school, because I really thought she was very human in what she was going through. And it depends on how she progresses, but not her mom, because her mom's come from that world and so ingrained into it that I think her mom has that separation that we were talking about earlier. But I thought I thought a lot of my enjoyment of that book was that I felt very much like if I was doing this training with Mom, I'd be questioning, like, what, Mom, why am I doing this? You know, and I liked her whole human vibe in that. So maybe Amethyst is more in this category. So I would say she's the female character right now that feels more in this category than some of the others, I think. Yeah. So, you know, we got your Jaime, you've got your Buddy, you've got her. The Flash to a certain extent, but I think once you hit Justice League status, you become larger than life.
Yeah, that's a little bit up there. Actually, Cyborg is probably another one that could do the hang.
No, because of the fact that he's Cyborg. I know where you're going with that. I mean, as far as he's definitely a human character, but I think he's so damaged because of what he's in there. Because, you know, he hangs up doesn't he hang at the satellite and stuff when, like, he's not there because he's distanced himself from humanity?
Yeah.
So I think, I think there's an accessibility to his vulnerability, but I don't think you can hang out with him. Amethyst, I think we'd have to talk to Constantine to get her to come. Like, we'd have to, like, summon her to dinner. But I think she'd hang with us, sword in tow.
Heck, I'd want to go to her world. I'd want to hang out in her world. Forget her bringing her here. I'll go over there, man.
Wouldn't we be attacked?
Hey, bring it.
Me thinks I've got to explain to you what hanging is. Going back to Buddy, because I got into, that was a deep tangent when I'm trying to talk about the uniqueness of Buddy. But going back to him, I liked his origin and how that was a setup. Yeah. Like, we need to make him believe that he's a superhero, not that that goes back to what I was saying earlier. I like the distinction that these avatars of the Red are not superheroes, but that they made him believe he was a superhero by the origin story that they made up for him. That was a neat twist because I think it puts in elements that were really unique to what Morrison was doing with him at the time, and goes back to actually the character's origins. So it doesn't throw anything out the window of what was cool and interesting about the character, but at the same time explains why Buddy was so wrong in what he was thinking.
Yeah, and it's funny, when I read The Animal Man, I will read Ellen a little bit different than you do. And I think part of it is because I'm not married, because I'm not in, this committed relationship with a partner. And there'll be times when I initially read her that she angers me and she annoys me. Like, come on, you're married to Animal Man. But, second, third read-throughs, you start seeing her side of it. You start seeing why she's upset with that he's not around. You start seeing that, and it's one of those things that have made me enjoy the book more, that I can get multiple stuff out of this. I can get, multiple experiences from the reread and from this, the stopping and looking and seeing what she's actually saying, not taking off any blinders I may have, any prejudices I may have about this. Okay, let's see what she's saying. She's not talking. She's not being an idiot. She's not being a jerk. She's generally concerned about her family, and she wants to protect her family. Yes, it's great that he's helping these people, but there is a risk there, and she does not want to put her family in danger. She wants to protect, she wants to protect the unit, and I get that, and I like that, and it's, as much as I like hanging out with Buddy, I do feel for her. Here's
where I feel for her. What have we been just doing all night? I got home from work. I taught a class after school, and I got home from work about 5:30ish. I think you and I started talking. My wife was on the phone when I got home. So my interaction with her basically involved with saying hi, very quick, because I didn't want to interrupt her phone call. Then I came up here and immediately I had to Skype you to get you on here because my wife was on the phone. So I Skyped to get you on here, and then you and I have been recording. It's now 8:32. My main interaction with my wife was at 6 this morning. And it was really a few minutes while we were getting ready for work, saying hello, how you doing, hope you have a good day, stuff like that. I already asked her in between. We took a quick break in between the two segments of Swamp Thing and Animal Man. I had some interaction with her as far as, how was her day and stuff like that. But we've really had no chance right now, and this requires a lot of patience of her, with the fact that her husband's podcasting. I've been working all day long, and this isn't me complaining or violining. It's more of defending kind of what Ellen's doing by seeing her from my wife's perspective. So to speak. She hasn't had access to her husband, my wife, in 14 hours. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you got an Ellen whose husband's off. He's an actor, which you know what actor schedules are. They can be very busy on the set, things like that. It's also, there is no set schedule. It's going to be depending on what kind of job he's got. But he's also a superhero. There's no set schedule there either. So for him to make time to prioritize family, when does that happen? And her frustration becomes she, a lot of times, winds up being a single parent when she needs Buddy to also be the parent because they've got two kids and two kids who are very young. Because Maggie's was determined as 4, right? In a recent issue, they were talking about, so she's like 4 years old, which means the son's a few years old, at the most, older. So they're very young kids. And kids that young, speaking of, I teach third graders. So the son is at best a third grader, age-wise, if you take a look at how old Maggie is, right? I forget the actual age difference because I know that we got to see the whole thing in part of the origin about when Maggie was in this, as far as, she's pregnant with Maggie now, but the son was very young at that point. So he can't be a third grader yet. So he's younger than that. Speaking of that, the younger the kids are, the more they need their parents, the less independent they are. They start to develop their own personalities along the way, but they also have strong needs for strong guidance from adults. For a single mom, essentially many times, which Ellen winds up being, to be doing that. And I'm not saying Buddy's a bad dad. Buddy's a good dad. Whenever he's home, he makes times for his kids, puts them first. But there's times where I'm sure he is away for long stretches. Ellen's worried. She's got stress from him. That's compounding things when she's trying to be a good parent to her kids. It's like any job for any couple. Your jobs, if you have different schedules and different hours and things like that, you don't always have the other person to rely on. So sometimes that will put stress on the husband. Other times it'll put stress on the wife. And the one thing I really like about their relationship is sometimes they get it horribly wrong in their interactions with each other because they haven't had a chance to have that talk, to have that contact time, like my wife and I haven't had tonight. Then there's other times where the two of them get it right when they finally have that deep conversation where Ellen says her piece. He listens to her, apologizes, and says his piece. And the two of them, you see them connecting and trying to find a way to work through it all together. But they're constantly reaching that breaking point. When you live with somebody and you've got differing personalities, which, there's nobody lives with a clone of themselves. You're going to have those natural stresses in a real relationship. Ellen and Buddy's relationship is very real. There's times where I get angry with her too. Yeah. There's times where I get angry with my wife. There's times where my wife gets angry with me. Usually when she's angry with me, she's justified. If I'm angry with her, I'm usually not. In fairness to her. And it's one of the things that I really like about the reality of this book is that there's times where you side with both. There's times where you think both are wrong. There's times where you think both are right, and that's the trap that they're in, that they're both right. You can see both of their perspectives, but their two differing viewpoints don't match up. And that's the reality and honesty. And that's why I was laying out that whole little thing on my end. It wasn't me complaining at all. It's just explaining reality. We all have those realities. I laid out mine. There's somebody listening to this that in their marriage, they don't podcast and stuff like that, but because they're working two jobs, or, their job causes them to travel, or, things like that. It'll put stress and strain, or maybe their wife travels, through their job. It'll put stress and strain on their relationship that they have to try to find a way to compromise and to talk and to make that time for themselves. And that's really the key important part to it is, and Buddy and his wife don't always have the chance to make that time for each other. And we as the reader notice that. We notice that breakdown in their relationship when that happens, and they need that time to reconnect. I actually long for that as a reader. Like, I want to see those issues where the two of them have that heart-to-heart and they wind up back together because they're a couple that you root for. And I think that's the strength of the writing in this title. I find myself rooting for them as a couple, even when I get mad or annoyed with either of them. If I want to smack either of them upside the head, I do find I don't know if you do, I find myself rooting for them to make that time for each other, to connect with each other, and to make that family work.
Yeah. It's funny. I was just thinking back to, with marriage and DC and just what does it take to be a happily married couple in the DC universe? And you start thinking of all the different, all the different relationships that we've seen, and there's been some that have been really positive. This, when you think about it, this is one of the more realistic ones that's been out there. We've seen some great couples out there. We've seen some fabulous, teams, but this really is one of those everyday people. Granted, he can access the animals, and their child is the avatar of the red, so there's, the supernatural end of it. But when you look at them, when you see their interactions, I can see you and Mariah having these kind of arguments. I can see, my siblings and their, their spouses, having these type of, interactions and these type of issues. And it really just, honestly, I'll tell you right now, it really did click for me. I enjoyed the story. I loved the family element of it, and I was really digging this, but it never really locked into place just how realistic and how true this is. Again, I don't have this. I don't have this relationship. My understanding and dealings with relationships are more of observation from what I've seen other people. And when I actually take that, style and that thought process, and I start thinking about what I've seen other couples go through, I'm like, this is the exact same stuff I've seen regular, everyday, real people deal with. And it's adding to my appreciation of this story.
And that's something that I'm really digging about the whole thing, is the fact that you have those moments with the two of them where it feels very natural, very real, in a way that doesn't fit for necessarily every character. I don't want it to fit for every character. I want it to be something that's kind of unique to Animal Man. Because one of the things I'm enjoying about this book is I like the fantastic. I love those characters that you look at and go, oh, I could never be that character. But there's that part of you that dreams that you could. You look at Lois Lane, and Lois Lane to me is still larger than life.
Yeah.
Because she is this amazingly intelligent worker bee, who isn't afraid to take those risks and dive for the story. She's the ultimate independent female who, and she's a superhero in her own right. And I think if you need to see her that way, because she is an iconic character, and who I think has been developed in such a way when she's written well, that you get that vibe. I don't know if you, I know you're a huge Lois Lane fan. I'm sure you get that same vibe from her that I do. There's something about her search for the truth and the search for the story and the things that she's willing to do that I think are pretty essential at the core to who she is. So when you see that relationship between the two, you always get why Clark would be in love with her and would want her affections and attentions, and yet would be torn with where that relationship can go and things like that, and how that works because of how his world is. But she's the ultimate one who challenges him and takes him to that level. But that's there's a fantastic Batman and Catwoman. That's a fantastic relationship. I mean, in the fantasy end of it, where it's like, it's so hopeless, yet it's so cool at the same time with how crazy their world is and all that. It's not grounded in reality, nor do I want it to be. I want it to be the place that it is because there's something cool about that. Aquaman and Mirror are that way as well, and I like that. It's fun to have that hero who seems more realistic. And I don't want them all that way. That wouldn't be fun. What's fun about Buddy is that he's unique.
Yeah, it is that approachability that we were talking about. It is, again, it's the approachability, realism, just comfort that you have with this guy. I didn't really know his history. I knew the basic stuff about how aliens and whatnot. So seeing them keep that in the story and adjusting it and modifying it to what is, this universe was wonderful for me. But this has been pretty much my exposure to this guy. And you who've had a history with the character, you who know the guy, and me who this is my history, this is really my exposure to him, we're both looking at the guy the same. And I think that is just because they're hitting who the core of the character is, and it's, it is that friend, that buddy.
This is one of those books that I think matches the accessibility that they were going for when they did the relaunch. And I don't know, that's something from reader to reader that I think is going to be different as far as how many characters were accessible to you when you did this. If you were new to the characters, I don't know how many of them hit that mark for everybody. But this was one that I really felt on the ground floor there was accessibility. And you said I have a history with him. I do, but not as much as you think. It was more on teams, that I knew the character. And Morrison's stuff in trade. But I was late to the dance on a lot of that and didn't read all of it. And, we had listeners on the show back when we started talking about that who were recommending to read more of the Morrison stuff. And I've got all of it that was in trade, and I started collecting single issues of what went beyond that even. And, I just haven't had time to read it, because we've got 10 gazillion other things that we're reading and doing for the show each week. But that's on my to-do list of things I want to read because I really like the character. So I was closer to you on the ground floor of this character with this series, other than I read the space stuff that you and I were enjoying with him when he was teamed up with Adam Strange and Starfire. Those minis were absolutely fantastic. So that really, I think you and I have that same background with those minis. I think I was more focused on the character in those than I ever had been previously. And this series, I could not imagine dropping this series ever. I love it because it's so special and unique. I mentioned, I'm almost positive I linked this character to what I liked so much about Starman, in the sense that I think he is a very unique character. I would actually say Jack Knight, in many ways, had that same kind of human, accessible relatability in the Starman series. And I think this Buddy fits that character role for me. It's a very special series in the way that it's presented. And if you're not reading this one, I highly recommend it. And actually, speaking of reality, Jim, I want to jump back to the book a little bit. When you have aliens going all Palmolive in your belly, dumping their fingers in, saying, "Oh, how does this organ make your fingers softer, or does that organ?" I loved how that all played out. Because, again, these aliens messed with him and somehow made him a superhero. All of this was done for the purpose of building an illusion for this guy. And I love that because we're talking so much about, buddies, what a really, realistic book and all that stuff. Then we turn to this page and you got this going on. So much for reality. And this guy's connecting with animals now. I love when he first gets, the superhero costume. Tell me you and I wouldn't be doing this. He puts on the suit and he's like, yes, I am a superhero now. Here's the problem. He has no clue what his powers are. So what's the first thing he's doing? Yeah, let me run and jump. It's time to fly. Boom.
Apparently not.
I think I've done this many times in my life with a cape on and stuff like that. And I would have no business thinking I was a superhero and I did this.
Heck, you probably did it last week.
I you know what? I may have. I loved when, just by accident, that bird landed on him.
Yeah.
And he connected with that, and that's how he learned to fly. That moment where he's like, oh, God, I can fly. I can fly. The emotion of that. What geek does not want to fly? What person doesn't want to fly? I mean, most people, we have, unless you're really afraid of heights, which I can understand that, the idea of being able to fly and to see the world from that perspective, the freedom of that. I mean, I've been in an airplane. I love seeing, the open view and stuff like that. I've never been in a helicopter or something, so I can't really comment on what that's like. But, there's a disconnect between having control over that and to be able to fly and to be able to have the freedom to go where you want and be able to just hover and look and see things from a perspective and really study it from that. That's something we can't do unless you're looking on like Google Earth or something. Yeah. And I really enjoyed that part of all this. And when he flies back home and, okay, the first thing in the world is his son sees dad flying. The wife's like, are you flying? I love that she's looking at him like, what is he wearing? Because my wife would be shaking her head going, what are you wearing? And that kind of stuff too. But I love that the kid's the one that comes out and goes, that's cool. My nephew Billy would so be this guy, this kid. I mean, I could so see him being that kind of, this is cool. Those kind of, I would be that kid back. I'd probably still be that kid. Like, he'd be like, dude, you're 41, get off me. But then when it turns to that page with the tabloids, this is something that I really like about how the New 52 has set things in present day. You get more of I think this happens very well in the Superman books now. I think they're doing a really good job of exploring how the newspaper world is different today than it was in the pre-Flashpoint DC universe. They're very much dealing with the fact that it's become more of an internet market, more of a TMZ market, and how do newspapers survive in that? I love that exploration in Superman. We're seeing this here with Animal Man saying, just say no to eating meat. Well, I can see that. But I love superhero Buddy Baker leaves wife for chimp. Yeah. Animal Man runs away with a monkey. And what a great shot. Because here's the thing. That picture happened.
Yeah.
And that was clearly when Buddy either saved that chimp or, used the powers from that chimp or something. And just because being in the proximity caused that type of thing to happen, somebody catches that shot and takes it out of context because that's what happens in the tabloids. And that's what Buddy gets left with. I absolutely adored that.
Heck, Buddy probably took told him, hey, here would be a funny picture for you, just goofing around because that's hanging out funny and this would be kind of funny. Yeah, here, I don't think that was even, it was taken out of context. He's not leaving his wife for the chimp, but I don't think it was any, I think he actually, flat out, and it was set up to take the picture while he was kissing the monkey, but it was just for a goof. It was something funny.
Oh, sure. And that could have been something for an ad, considering his line of work.
Yeah.
Because who knows, how that, I find that endlessly interesting. At the end, though, Arcane, this is the creepy strategy, the strategery, as you mentioned earlier, that you were talking about with Arcane. I really agree with your sentiments about that, because he does fit what I like about characters like Lex Luthor, but with a unique creep factor that only fits him. I like that. He's like, no, her being born might be a good thing because I can use that. And I think he's particularly talking about her age. Yeah. And if we can manipulate the family, maybe I can utilize that in a way that, and he does manipulate it in a way that it puts Dad in a position where he leaves and it gives him a chance to rule things. I'm going to be curious to see what happens with Maggie as this story progresses, and how Maggie's going to play a part in. Is she going to play a part in? I almost think she has to, in restoring things.
Yeah, she's the true, guardian, avatar, champion of the Red. Buddy's not the champion. the daughter is. So they're going to need her, and working with her and Swamp Thing, I'm assuming, to actually clean everything up.
Now, I want to talk about. I usually compliment this book for being so grounded in reality. But at the opening of issue number 13, you have the sequence where Buddy comes back, and clearly he's back on Earth and disoriented by the fact that everything's been devastated. But then you see this thing, and this is pure fantasy. Hawkman shows up and succumbed. And that's just not going to happen. He's Hawkman. Hawkman would ultimately, if there was one hero standing on Earth, it would be Hawkman versus the Rot. I adored that sequence because of my love for Hawkman. He comes in, and you see Buddy, like, really at that moment trying to, like, reason with him. And, what happened to you? What can I do to help? And things like that. I don't know that I agree with how easily he was dispatched.
Let's not say easy. I'll tell you, Hawkman still was throwing down. His head gets lopped off, and he's still fighting. That again shows the tenacity of Hawkman.
That's a good point. Even headless, he's
even
bad.
Headless, he was still, and headless, he was standing. Well, you can see the scene. He's standing on the throat of Beast Boy, who's a lion. So he's powerful enough to throw down a lion headless. That is, some pretty toughness.
That could be his new tagline. I'm powerful enough to step on a lion headless.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that intimidate you a little bit?
That would definitely be a pretty cool intimidation factor there. That is a definitive statement of being a tough guy. You
know why I could never write Hawkman?
Why?
Because I would have, when she explodes the rest of his body, I would have gone too far and kept him fighting in that condition.
Multiple little body parts coming at you.
Exactly. Still stepping on the lion. Even completely disemboweled. I'm still fighting because I'm Hawkman.
Like the Monty Python scene.
Yes.
Chop off the arm. Oh, I still got another one.
Come back here. I'll bite your leg off. Yeah. Great stuff. I really is very similar to what happened with Swamp Thing. Because the people didn't have that information, the assumptions that they abandoned their roles, and the bitterness of all these people realizing that, if these two hadn't left, this would have been totally different. To a certain extent, they are, because it is their world. I get, where do you stand on their responsibility in all this, Jim? Because I can see why people would be pointing the finger at them, but is it fair to point the finger at them just because they happen to have the power sets that they do and have gotten their powers from, at what point in time, how does it become your responsibility?
Well, it's, on one hand, I understand everybody's anger and resentment, but when you learn what they were doing, what they were trying to do, that for me would change everything. I'd be calmer. Well, okay, I understand what you did. Now we got to work together and fix this. Beast Boy has one of the greatest lines in there when they're talking about taking the fight to Arcane and not just sitting back. He's like, hey, we're heroes, aren't we? This is what we do. It's that same logic, that same type of mindset that if I was one of these guys, if I was one of the champions of the Red and Buddy came back, I'd be like, hey, where the heck were you, dude? We needed you. And as soon as he explained it to me, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I get you. Well, here's what you've missed. Let me bring you up to speed. What's the plan? And it would, for me, it would shift over to, okay, yeah, you messed up before. Let's fix it now. Let's do the hero thing.
I love the bit at the Louisiana before Rotworld where we see Maggie, and I liked the way that this story shifted between times. Very similar to what we were seeing with Abigail in the Swamp Thing books. I was really enjoying this because I wanted to know, but I liked how it was teased along the way, and we went on a ride. And the mom sitting there saying, I didn't know what happened to your brother. You need to use your powers now. I know I told you not to, but you need to do that. And the grandmother coming back and saying, but we need to wait for Buddy, knowing how she feels about Buddy.
Yeah.
But, she's had some really powerful moments with Buddy lately that I think have shown the way she feels and how some of her feelings have changed or softened. when mom goes running off, you just know that's not going to go well.
Yeah, that's just going to be an issue. That's going to be a problem. And again, it was one of those moments where first read through, I'm thinking one thing. Second and third read through, I'm like, oh, okay, I get what she's doing. I get why she's doing it. The first read through, I'm like, dude, no, listen to your mom. Batten down the hatches. But again, I also have more knowledge than they do on the what's going on in the world. But there was a come on, you know better than this. This isn't a smart move, but you kind of understand that this is her child. This is her kid. There's a level of rationality that kind of gets thrown out the window when you're dealing with the missing child, and your first reaction is, I gotta go out and find them. I have to save my kid. I have to rescue them. It's that maternal instincts kicking in, going into overdrive. She's in mama bear protective mode. She's got to find her cub. And that was something that as I'm reading it, I'm getting her groove. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's again a really cool, realistic reaction.
I love what we see that happened with Poison Ivy's arm. We see it in this book.
Yeah.
We didn't actually see it in Swamp Thing. It was bitten off by the rot. That controlling that infection, or I guess that's what it was, focusing that infection in that area is what's kept her surviving. But we see the various, what happened to the Flash, what happened to Batwoman. I don't think there's going to be a team up very soon with Zombie, Supergirl, and Batwoman.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking, she punched through her, which, because she would have been a good a warrior to have on your side. Batwoman, just because of the survive, adaptability, improvise, adapt, overcome, she would have been a good, soldier in the fight. But, she went up against a rotted Supergirl, so she's kind of a little bit outmatched there.
When we see the son and everything going on with him and Mommy, and I'm going to kind of jump ahead a little bit with that because I think we can follow that story a little bit more closely and talk about how they meet up with the son, and then through those interactions, he gradually starts to infect them.
Yeah.
And that's what ends up leaving Maggie alone, is the fact that they've been infected, which I'm wondering when this storyline's over, how everything's going to be reversed, and who's going to remember what, and what that's going to look like for these families and characters. Is Maggie going to remember everything? Is Buddy's family going to remember everything? What is that going to look like moving forward from all this? Because we have no idea how this is going to be resolved.
Yeah, it's the whole party wants them to remember everything because I think that would make for interesting stories, but what if only one of them remembers? What if only the little girl remembers everything that happened? How will that affect her? How will she deal with her family? Does she, let her mom know that the mom got infected and that the brother got it and everything, all the nastiness happens, or does she keep it in to protect them from what could possibly happen or what did happen to them in the past?
I love that this issue ended in the mystery of what happened to Maggie. I was pretty convinced that, she was going to be the one that survived because she's the Avatar. So I wasn't really worried about her having a target, but I loved the way that Constantine's saying, this did happen, though, because you weren't here to do your job and protect her, because that really was what he was given the powers to do. So Constantine, is, in his usual charming manner, really is laying out the facts the way that it needs to. I just love Constantine.
Yeah.
I've been a big fan of Hellblazer in recent years. I got on like the Andy Diggle run and then Milligan's run and stuff like that. I've really enjoyed that look at the character and where the character's gone. And seeing him here in the DC universe and interacting with these heroes and feeling so much like that guy is something I'm really digging. I love Justice League Dark, and we are going to talk about it next episode because of moments like that. Constantine's a hard guy to like. But yet there's part of you that does. He's that friend you constantly apologize for, but you hang out with him because he saved you from demons.
And, the other positive thing about him is, on one hand, I think if I was in a crisis, I would want him there in the crisis with me. Because while he's not the Superman, I'll jump in front of the bullet for you, when I get shot, he will try to figure out a way to save me, and he's clever enough that he may be able to pull it off.
With a caveat, if there's some kind of magical artifact, you're doomed. Because he will let you fall. So I agree with everything you're saying, and I do agree with you that he's not the Superman dun-da-da, but he will not hesitate to let you fall if need be in order for him to accomplish his goals, which is something I like. The flaw of him. He's cooler than cool, but not very likable, yet there is that part of you that does. And you feel like you shouldn't like him, which makes him a very unique... You know what I mean? I mean,
yes,
he's a character that you like, but you feel like you shouldn't like. You're not quite, with his flaws and everything, there is, like, he's brash. And I do think, I know for our past, we've had multiple friends we've needed to apologize for, like Constantine, and and I think that's that's why I connect with the character, because I'm like, oh yeah, he's definitely fits into that category. I'm not saying we've had a Constantine as a friend, but you've had that guy that you're like, we're still friends with, and people wonder why, and that's the kind of cool reality of Constantine. Are you, like, I know this is kind of a little bit of a tangent. Are you excited? You're excited about him having his own DC Universe series? Yes,
I am very excited about him having his own series. And only thing I am concerned about is what title is getting cut to make room for it. I think they're cutting Frankenstein to make room for it, which kind of upsets me because I really enjoy Frankenstein.
There was like 5 titles that were on the chopping block.
Oh, man.
If I remember correctly. There was a list of them, and I forget what they were. They actually, I'm almost positive somebody posted them in our Facebook group, and I read them. Frankenstein is one of the ones on the chopping block. And, but here's my take on those. I'm so glad that we've had this Frankenstein series. I'm glad that I'm sure Frank's going to appear. I think he is on Justice League Dark, if I remember correctly. And I apologize if I'm wrong on that, because I'm really... A lot of this stuff, I'm trying to remember what I read from genuine articles and what from rumor mills and what from people who were on our Facebook group or Google Plus or something like that were kind enough to post to me about what was going on, or friends mentioned to me in passing, and that stuff I do agree is legitimate, because they get them from comic book news websites that they've got that genuine information. So I don't know on that end, but I'm hoping Frankenstein winds up somewhere, because I really, really love the character. But I like the idea that, okay, if, these books, the ones that they're cutting, aren't selling where they want them to go, or maybe their intention all along was to give those books a certain amount of life, and then let's launch out new concepts and things like that. I'm really enjoying the uniqueness of the current lineup. So if you're taking out a Frankenstein, I think you need to put a Constantine in there. Because I need another book that's in this family of books. So I'm cool with that. Not that I want to lose. I love Frankenstein. So no, I don't want to lose that book. So please don't misunderstand me. That's one of those that I'm sad to see go, similar to what you mentioned. I echo that entirely. And when we talk about Frankenstein more next episode, I'm going to be thrilled to share why I like Frankenstein so much. But please put something back in this lineup, because I like this family of titles that's in here. And if Constantine's going to be the one to replace it, great. Let's do more with that book and that character. So going back into... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, another character from this Rotworld that I really enjoyed?
Who?
John Henry Irons. I love how they did and what they did with him, where he recognized what was going on. He figured out that they need the flesh to rot, so he transferred his consciousness into his battle armor. There is no more John Henry Irons. There is only this armor. There is only just this automated man who has the conscious and probably maybe soul of steel in him. And I thought that for me was just a great character, and again, another character adapting to this world, and it makes sense that he would come up with this, and he would do that because that's the kind of guy he is.
Mm-hmm. You're right, and that's honestly, I think that's a strength of sometimes when you have characters guest star in a book like this, they somehow are they need to be diminished, or I shouldn't say they need to be. I think somehow the creative teams or editorial feel like those characters need to be diminished to spotlight the main character. I did not feel that way at all with Black Orchid and with John Henry Irons, and characters like in Constantine.
Yeah.
I felt, if anything, those characters were spotlighted the way that they should be.
Exactly. Spot on.
Yeah, and when you were saying that about, I ditto on your comments about John Henry Irons, because he's a character I don't think I would love to see more of in the DCU. I've loved his appearances so far in, Superman and stuff like that. I just want to see more of this character, because he's a character who I've always loved. And this is exactly who I think Steel is. And I loved him in this. And I'm glad to see creators using guest stars in ways that are spotlighting that guest star just as much as the main character, because I think that shows creative writing as well. When Batgirl did this recently with the Batwoman crossover. Like, I felt when, Batwoman was in the Batgirl issues, Batwoman was every bit as cool as we see her in her own book, and I think it was because we saw her through Batgirl's eyes. And yet, in many ways, I felt just as connected and validated by Barbara Gordon being Barbara in that book. And that was a great use of crossovers. So I want to see more of that type of thing in these comics, because it's great to see these characters through each other's eyes. Boy, Grandma had it coming, didn't she? Mom and the brother had it quite a bit easier than Grandma did.
Yeah, especially the mom. She had a very easy transition, but Grandma it wasn't good for her.
That would be very hard for a little girl, and I loved seeing her reaction in this with Maggie, and I loved her friend, the cat. How the cat really, had to really pick and choose when used its powers, because there was a limited amount of powers and that has to recharge and stuff like that, but winds up being a Jiminy Cricket, a conscience kind of character that, we get to see the human side of Maggie. I admire Maggie's strength, something fierce. Especially, I didn't realize she was a 4-year-old. And I don't know if that was something that was addressed in earlier issues. And I'm a dunce if it was. So I'm not knocking the writing or anything like that. I'm sure it was. This issue, it stood out for me for some reason when, the 4-year-old stuff was mentioned with her. The way that she was reacting with that cat, and, we get to see her step up and her strength. There's something about seeing a 4-year-old do that. I've really enjoyed her character development in this series. At first I was kind of like, oh, I don't know, you're diminishing Buddy by making her. If anything, I think it's made him a stronger dad, because to know that his daughter's is more powerful than him, and yet to try and be that protector and to still try and be the dad. I think that's always a hard thing for a parent, is when, how do you keep your child on the right path, especially in the case of when they've got so much power like Maggie does. And it is such a scary place that she's taking Buddy to that he's never been to before. She has a connection to these powers in a way that's far beyond what he has. Yet as a dad, he has to find a way to be a guide for her and be a support for her and be a protector for her when she is so much more powerful than him. A very hard thing to do. And I always liked this concept that Supergirl was a little more powerful than Superman, but yet you had Superman's experience that kind of gave him an edge, if that made sense.
Yeah. And
I like the concept here that, Dad being older and wiser and all that kind of stuff, but yet he still learns things from his daughter too. I don't know. There's something that I just really enjoy about how these characters are being presented. You need to have, in a quality comic book, great supporting cast. And this book is chock full of great supporting cast that I really, really care about. Everyone in Buddy's family matters to me, including the grandma.
Amen.
When I got to tell you, when this thing's going on and the red area is being attacked, and they have to make a decision, like you said, as heroes to go on to that attack, and you see Shepard and that crew saying, we're going to hold this place, especially if you're going and taking them with you. Yeah. What a great line, because wouldn't that be so true? I think I'm with Shepard. You know what? I would be more than willing to volunteer to step up and guard the place when you're taking a majority of the army with you. And Shepard didn't mean it that way, but I loved the irony of that because I could see myself joking about that at that time. And I thought that was, again, a great example of honest writing where characters would be presenting the realities of a situation in a way that would make us all laugh because who's Arcane's crew going to follow? Of course, Animal Man, where he's going, because he's going to want to put a stop to them because he certainly doesn't want Animal Man standing a shot at connecting with Swamp Thing and putting up any real resistance to what he's been doing.
You know, the rotted version of Hawk and Dove, and then, of course, the rotted version of Deathstroke and Grifter. Again, really cool. Glad to see these DC characters are, infected and throwing down and just getting their destruction.
I liked Faust being used here. Because he's the same creepy character, you would know him from pre-Flashpoint.
Okay, yeah.
And, great to use that character in this magic world. And for Buddy, I like that certain characters, like not everything is rebooted. Certain characters are people that Buddy would know. Faust has been around for a while. Buddy's clearly had interactions with Faust before. I was the way that DC handled this New 52 reboot, instead of going right back to the beginning, starting them earlier in their careers. So there is this sense of you don't need to do this full origin from everybody, and every single issue is brand new for every single character. Certain characters needed a full reboot right from the start. I get that, and with what they were doing, makes a whole lot of sense. But I like the idea that with Buddy, we didn't get this. He's already been Animal Man for a while. And this is something that his wife and family have been dealing with for a while. And he would know a Faust because of that. That was something that I really enjoyed. Constantine's been around for a while. He's had a relationship with Zatanna. We see, and we'll talk about this with Justice League Dark, we see the origins of all that stuff in the Zero issue. But, the sense of longevity of some of these characters works. Some of them should have been around already and have some history in that during that 5-year span or whatever. And I like that. It's something that... I don't know what made them choose which characters got full reboots and which characters had a history still. Other than, obviously, Batman and Green Lantern, it's a no-brainer why they did what they did with those characters because of their sales numbers and, just the fan reaction to what was already there. So I get why they did with those characters. But, who had a history and who was a real restart was something I would love to see it to be a fly on the wall. And know what led to those decisions, because it didn't happen with everybody. Like Animal Man didn't get a full restart from square one where we saw his first days as Animal Man. We see it in the Zero issue now, but that was something that we didn't need to see in this series. And it was a good choice.
Yeah, they had to jump right into it, and you needed to pull people in immediately. And again, this has been a really cool balancing act. And you look at just all this action going on the screen right now. You've got multiple fights going on, multiple people getting crushed, arms ripped off, disemboweled, and whatnot. But we're still getting a continuation of the story, because it's a lot of this information is stuff we already know from reading Swamp Thing or if you read Frankenstein, but they crafted this story so that you didn't have to read Swamp Thing to know about the fall of the other heroes. You don't need to read Frankenstein to know about the other stuff. This is a fully contained story, and that's something that I appreciated how they pull it in. They're giving us all the same information, but I'm not sitting there going, oh, okay, yeah, same old, same old. No, this is a different way of telling the story, a different way of visually telling a story. I'm getting a cool adventure, but I'm still getting this background that I need if this was my only exposure to the world. Again, it's another kudos to the creative process, kudos to the story that's being told. We got a lot of information to give out, but we don't want to tell it the same way all the other stories told it. Let's tell it this way. Let's put our little spin on it. Let's put our accents on it.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed that. You know what? I want to comment on Beast Boy being red, because you mentioned that, didn't you, on one of the episodes that you thought that was that you?
Yeah.
I don't remember where I heard that. I think that, and I never connected with that, and I think I saw it on our Facebook group too. But I think the first time I actually heard it was when you and I were having a discussion, and I didn't know that I clearly did not make that connection. And when you were throwing that out, that he would be connected with the red the way Animal Man was. And I love that was the reason why he's red instead of green, because that does make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I really dig that. And again, it's like Ivy part of the green, he's part of the red. This is where they fit in. And, it's I like seeing this combined. And also, it was kind of neat that they started going into Black Orchid's origin. Started just kind of giving a little hints to who she is, where she's coming from. And, of course, it gets interrupted. Something that we don't know about the character yet. Everything's always been, it's classified. I'm not talking about it. Well, here in the universe, she's kind of opening up, and they get interrupted just as it's just about to start. Like,
We talked a lot about what Maxine's already gone through, but I want to make sure we focus on the ending. I hear someone, Maxine, something's not right. No, it's silly. It's just a little boy. It's so not just a little boy. Talk about what a way to lure her in and just how evil William Arcane is. Please don't hurt me. You're not one of those things, those monsters. No, I'm the Avatar of the Red, and my daddy is a superhero. You don't need to be scared. I'm Maxine. What's your name? My name is William. William Arcane. What the sweet little boy. He's like an evil, it fits to say this, an evil Dennis the Menace.
Oh, man. Again, another one, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
I didn't see them using him that way, and I was just like, I was kicking myself. I was like, and I had read Swamp Thing, so I knew he was around still.
Wait, you know who he is? He's Calvin if Calvin killed Hobbes. Yes. What a great, great character. Because I genuinely liked him since his initial introduction to him. Now, Buddy, I love Buddy being the dad, sitting there saying that, I've got to go after my daughter no matter what. And them having this moment where they're sitting down and having this group meeting to try and plan strategy. And not only are they attacked by Grodd, but Mashamala and the Brain and, the Gorilla Army. Because I don't remember, do we see Mashamala and the Brain so far yet in the New 52?
I don't recall seeing them other than here.
Yeah, Grodd I know we've seen in Flash.
Yeah.
But I don't remember seeing them. What a great use of these characters.
And I was kind of excited, curious as to how they survived. How did they avoid the rot? Or is it just the stick and move? Or is it because they're monkeys and they're really cool? Or gorillas, excuse me, don't want to insult them.
Promised dominance over the other animals. These are animals that they're intelligent, sentient animals that would have a reason to want to take down the Red. Because if the Red keeps its balance, it means the good creatures of nature would have control of things. Whereas, what does Grodd want? Dominance. The promise of dominance by Arcane would be enough to make that alliance with Grodd. Now, the thing is, I have no doubt what Arcane would ultimately do to Grodd, if needed, when all is said and done.
100% double cross coming there. So, and I can't see. I want to know why Grodd is accepting, or maybe Grodd isn't. Maybe Grodd is just like, I'm not with you, I'm my own army.
Why do villains team up? Because they see an opportunity, and they're all waiting for that moment to turn on each other. They all know that. It's one of the reasons why they make strange bedfellows, because they can't trust each other, which is something I found so fascinating about books like Secret Six.
Yeah.
Where these characters all have these tentative relationships, but a card that get out of hell free card can take a relationship that seems like it's so close knit together and remind everyone that these are really crooks. That's the kind of stuff that I think it's what separates a hero from a villain. The fact that opportunistic villains will take advantage of any situation. And I liked how different this felt than Swamp Thing, yet it feels like it's so interconnected to all that. And my kudos, again, to DC's handling of crossovers like this. I want to see more of this in comics, where you have characters cross over and they're part of the same world, but if you're a reader of a single title, you can keep reading that title and get a good, complete story. I think that's really, really essential to, for the people that are on a budget, that get event-itis. I think they get event-itis because what ends up happening is that means they have to drop titles in order to follow big events and things like that. And I think that when you allow people to be able to be a part of an event, still reading the titles that they enjoy, you build a brand loyalty. And they may consider trying another book from that crossover. Like an Animal Man reader might consider picking up Frankenstein or Swamp Thing because they have enough room in their budget maybe for one more title, but not the whole thing. But when you make those titles accessible like they are with this, it's a great way to show readers that you have enough confidence in the quality of the books that people are going to pick them up for that reason instead of you being forced to follow the story to those other titles. And sometimes when you do that, you weaken the story because it feels forced. Nothing about this feels forced. These are great, well-done comics that are very different because the creative teams understand the concept that they're developing. They understand how it affects their main character and their supporting cast, and it enhances and adds so much more to the reality of this world when we see them accurately portrayed the way that they've been every other issue for the last year as this Rotworld hits. And to me, that's what makes it so cool, is this just feels like a natural flow from where everything's been for these two particular books. And I know I'm kind of putting Swamp Thing and Animal Man together, but I am so giddy over this because it, to me, is what's working so well in this book. It's in Swamp Thing. It's what's working in the Green Lantern books and the Batman books. I know I keep going back to those, but they're doing similar things in those with their crossovers. And this is, to me, I think it should be a template for crossovers. I really do, because I think it works. I think it's much better for the reader when they can do this, and I think it's better for the story because you've got that, those contained parts where they belong. And I don't know. That's, me rambling.
And I'm sitting here just nodding my head saying, oh, my brother, testify. Amen, amen. I'm complete agreement with you on this stuff and just how they're handling these crossovers. Especially, I really, really enjoyed this Rotworld story. This is something, and it's every time I reread it, I'm getting more out of it. I'm getting more of an enjoyment from it. And I think that is, again, the strength of the story being told. This is, this is a focus on the story we're getting great, beautiful artwork. But this is a really strong focus on this story, on the overarch, and on the long build. They're taking this and they're, this has been a long build coming, and this is, you get that energy, you get that feeling from it.
And I like that it's not, because they're doing Rotworld, it's not forced into the whole universe. It feels like a whole universe event because naturally, with the nature of the story, you see how many characters are affected by all this, and I think that's fantastic. But I like that they didn't all of a sudden randomly throw Teen Titans is now a part of the Rotworld crossover. That just makes no sense.
Right.
You're derailing what's going on in Titans to force them into this crossover. I like whole universe crossovers. I'm not against them. I'm not anti them. But I think, books that come into that crossover have to make sense. There has to be a genuine reason. There has to be a point where the title naturally flows into that event, or else it derails what was going on in that title before. And I'm not a fan of that. I think the idea of letting creators play in the sandboxes that they want to, or that their books naturally flow into, is something that makes sense to me. Forcing books into those crossovers does not work. I think fans are more savvy now, and they get annoyed by that. And that's where eventitis comes in. I don't think people are sick of events. I think they're sick of good stories being derailed because they have to be pigeonholed into this event. And we're seeing nowadays a more organic way of books going to events where actual titles feel like event. Animal Man feels like an event right now. Swamp Thing feels like an event right now. Frankenstein feels like an event right now. And that's the way it should be. Your book should feel like an event. I think every single monthly title should feel like an event. That should be a part of your reading experience. I'm going to go back to Starman again. Starman was one that very sparingly in its tenure of over 80 issues crossed over into anything. It crossed over into that Genesis crossover, I think, and that may have been it. Maybe there was one more. They had one crossover with Power Shazam, where it was 2 issues that Power Shazam that intersected, and that was totally beautifully written, where that story flowed all the way through. Shazam was an integral part. Captain Marvel was an integral part of that story, and that was just a really well-done crossover. But otherwise, it was a very contained series that had huge story arcs that always felt like events in that book. That's what you need to do. That's a quality book. And they're doing that now in this universe. And this is stuff that I'm just absolutely eating up. And it's one of the reasons why I really wanted to, and I was glad you felt the same way, I really wanted to focus this episode and now next episode. It was funny, when you and I were talking about this, we realized, wait a minute, do you know how many issues we need to talk about? Because we want to make sure to continue following the Zero issues, because we said we were going to cover all the Zero issues. But it's silly now to ignore the fact that the books have continued going beyond that, because we're also almost doing the readers who have been like saying, hey, I'm an Animal Man fan. When are you guys finally going to talk about Animal Man? Well, I'd rather do it this way, where somebody's an Animal Man reader that's been really wanting and jonesing for us to talk about this, feels like they've been reading these issues along the way, and they feel like they can, enjoy what we've been getting out of it and add to that discussion. In Facebook and Google Plus and Twitter and all those places, and calling into the show voicemail line. So I'm hoping you guys are enjoying this as much as Jim and I are, where every week Jim and I have a nice organic discussion about, hey, what would you like to talk about next week? And we kind of look through some of the titles we haven't talked about in a while and which ones are really standing out for us, because we want to have those discussions in a way that are meaningful and honest right from the core. And boy, I can't be more honest than talking about just how cool Rotworld is. So I'm really glad we get to talk about this.
Now I can get out of here.
Once again, sponsoring us this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Remember, go over to DCB Service this month and be checking out over the next few days as they start posting the brand new deals for December. This is a great month with holidays coming up and lots of extra shopping that you're going to be doing to save money on the comics you're already enjoying. It's also a great chance with those deals to be able to try out a few new books that you haven't been able to try before because your budget hasn't allowed for it. So make sure to check out DCBService.com, your comic book pre-order source. Over at InStockTrades.com, remember the Swamp Thing collection's available over there. They have an amazing amount of Swamp Thing books. I mentioned a few of them before. They have the Swamp Thing trade paperback Volume 1, Raise Them to the Bones. If you haven't been reading the current series with Scott Snyder, that's $14.99 regularly, 45% off, only $8.24. It's a great chance to check out the first volume of this series. It's amazing. I've become a huge Swamp Thing fan due to the material that they're doing, so make sure to pick up that trade. I want to thank InStockTrades.com and DCBService.com for continuing to support our show. Jim, our next episode, we're going to continue this by kicking off first with Frankenstein. And we're going to talk about Frankenstein's role in this storyline. And then we're also going to jump into Justice League Dark and talk about the Zero issue up to the current issues of Justice League Dark as well, to kind of wrap up our discussion of this supernatural world. Plus, we'll definitely do listener voicemails. So we've got 3 of them waiting to go. And if anybody else has a chance, then they want to call in, our show voicemail line is 1-440-388-4434 or drnorge on Skype. That's always in the show notes and available on our website, ragingbullets.com, in the About Us section. And Jim, I want to shout out Facebook and Google Plus, and in particular our Facebook group. I'm a real big fan of our Facebook group. We have a regular Facebook page for Raging Bullets, but then we also have a separate group that's a discussion group that basically acts as our show forum. And please feel free to join in. And if you think there's anybody, John Wilson made me think of this. If there's anybody who doesn't listen to our show, but you think they would benefit from some of the great comic discussion that goes on in that Facebook group, please encourage them to join, because I think it's really fantastic. I didn't think of this until John mentioned it, that there's some people that just want to talk positively about comics and shout out things that they're enjoying that might find a benefit of popping into our Facebook group, even if they're not a podcast listener. So please feel free to invite friends of yours to our Facebook group, maybe who don't listen to podcasts, because I love the fact that it's kind of connected a community of people who just want to geek out and shout out comics that they're really enjoying. And things relating to comics and geek culture that they're really enjoying, because it really doesn't have to be just limited to DC Comics. It can be limited to anything that you're really enjoying that you think of will be benefiting your blogs and podcasts and different things like that you want people to be aware of. I just think it's a great community, and I want to say thank you to all the people that regularly post and participate there, because it's really gone beyond anything that the show has done. You guys as a community have really taken charge of that, and that's taken a life of its own. It just happens to have a label on it that it's our Facebook group, and I love that I'm a part of a community with such great people that you guys have kind of taken it over and made it something fun and interesting. So thank you very much for that. We will see you all next week.
Bye.
space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thenengard or Egyptian, working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you would just call for backup. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see.